The morning Marcus Reed bought a stranger breakfast, he had no idea he was saving a ghost. What happens when one act of kindness collides with a secret so dangerous it could destroy everything? When a single father with nothing to give meets a woman who's lost everything, including herself. This is a story about survival, compassion, and the invisible threads that connect broken people in a broken world. Stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the globe. The cold came early that year. It wasn't the kind of cold that crept in gradually, giving people time to adjust, to pull out their heavy coats and check their furnaces. No, this cold arrived like a fist through glass, sudden and vicious, turning the city into something hostile overnight. By the first week of December, the streets were slick with black ice, and the wind carried a bite that went straight through fabric, through skin, all the way down to the bone. Marcus Reed felt it most in the mornings. 4:30 a.m. That's when his alarm went off every weekday, a shrill digital scream that yanked him out of whatever shallow sleep he'd managed to find. He never hit snooze anymore. There wasn't time for that luxury. The moment his feet touched the cold floor of his tiny apartment, the day's calculations began. How much time before Lily woke up? How long the bus would take? Whether he could afford to stop for coffee, or if he should save those $3 for something more essential. Today, he stopped. Not because he could afford it, but because he needed it. One small mercy before the machinery of his life ground him down for another 12 hours. The corner cafe, a place with no name on the sign, just a faded awning and windows perpetually fogged with steam, was his ritual. It opened at 5, and Marcus was almost always the first customer. The owner, a thick-shouldered man named Paulo, who spoke more Portuguese than English, knew Marcus's order by heart. Black coffee, one plain bagel, toasted. $2.75. The same breakfast Marcus had been buying for nearly 8 months, ever since the promotion that never came and the layoff that did. The bell above the door chimed as Marcus pushed inside, and the warmth hit him like an embrace. Paulo looked up from behind the counter, already reaching for a cup. "Cold one," Paulo said, his accent turning the words into something musical. "Coldest yet," Marcus agreed, peeling off his gloves. His fingers were stiff, the joints aching in a way that made him feel older than 34. While Paulo worked the coffee machine, Marcus scanned the cafe out of habit. It was a small space, 6 tables, a counter with wobbly stools, walls covered in faded photographs of Lisbon and handwritten specials that hadn't changed in years. Normally this early, the place was empty except for Paulo and the ancient radio crackling out yesterday's news. But not today. Marcus's gaze caught on the corner booth near the window. Someone was sitting there, hunched so far forward they were almost folded in half. A woman, he realized. She wore a thin jacket, far too thin for this weather, and her dark hair hung in damp strings around her face. She wasn't moving, just sitting there, staring at the scratched tabletop like it held the answers to questions she was too afraid to ask. "She been here long?" Marcus asked quietly, nodding toward the window. Paulo glanced over, his expression hardening just a fraction. "Maybe an hour. Ordered nothing. I tell her she has to buy something or leave, but..." He trailed off with a shrug that said more than words could. Marcus turned back to the woman. Even from across the room, he could see she was shaking. Not just from the cold, though that was part of it. There was something else, something deeper, something broken. Her hands were pressed flat against the table, and he noticed the way her shoulders curved inward, like she was trying to make herself smaller, invisible. He knew that posture. He'd worn it himself once, years ago, when he'd been younger and hungrier and too proud to ask for help. Back when staying invisible felt like the only way to survive another day. "Give me another bagel," Marcus said suddenly. "And another coffee. Cream and sugar." Paulo raised an eyebrow. "You don't drink cream and sugar." "I know." Understanding flickered across Paulo's weathered face, but he didn't comment. Just nodded once and reached for another cup. Marcus paid, $5.50 this time, which left him with $12 and change until Friday, and carried the extra coffee and bagel across the cafe. His footsteps echoed on the worn linoleum. As he approached, the woman's head snapped up, her eyes going wide with something that looked uncomfortably like fear. Up close, Marcus could see she was younger than he'd initially thought. Mid-20s, maybe, though it was hard to tell. Her face was pale, almost translucent, with dark circles carved deep beneath her eyes. There was a bruise along her jawline, faded to a sickly yellow-green. She stared at him like a cornered animal, every muscle tense, ready to bolt. "Hey," Marcus said softly, stopping a few feet away. I ordered too much. Wasn't thinking. You want this?" He held out the coffee and bagel, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. The woman didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the offering like it might disappear if she blinked. "It's just going to go to waste otherwise," Marcus continued, his voice gentle. "And it's too damn cold out there to let good food go bad, you know?" Still nothing. But he saw her throat work as she swallowed, saw the way her eyes tracked from the food to his face and back again, calculating, weighing risks he couldn't begin to guess at. "I'll just leave it here," Marcus said finally. He set the coffee and bagel on the edge of her table, careful not to invade her space. "No strings attached, okay?" He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him, so quiet he almost missed it. "Why?" Marcus looked back. She was staring at him now, really staring, and there was something raw in her expression, something that made his chest tighten. "Because someone did the same for me once," he said. It wasn't entirely true, but it felt true enough. When I needed it. He left her there and returned to his own table by the door, sat down with his coffee, and tried to focus on the morning ahead, getting Lily up, fed, and to daycare before his shift started at 7:30. He didn't look at the woman again. Didn't want to make her feel watched or obligated. But from the corner of his eye, he saw her move, saw her reach out slowly, fingers trembling, and wrap both hands around the coffee cup like it was precious. Saw her bring it to her lips and take a long, shuddering sip. And then, so carefully it almost broke his heart, she picked up the bagel and took a bite. Marcus finished his own coffee quickly after that and headed for the door. The cold hit him again as he stepped outside, but it didn't feel quite as sharp anymore. The next morning, she was there again. Same table, same thin jacket, same hollow-eyed stare aimed at nothing in particular. Marcus spotted her the moment he walked in. This time he didn't hesitate. Ordered his usual, then a second coffee and bagel without Paolo saying a word. The older man just nodded, something like approval in his eyes, and prepared both orders. Marcus approached the table the same way as before, slowly, carefully, making himself small and unthreatening. "Morning," he said. The woman looked up. Recognition flickered across her face, followed immediately by that same wariness, that same fear, but she didn't flinch away this time. "I remembered you like cream and sugar," Marcus said, setting down the coffee. "Hope that's still right." She stared at the cup for a long moment, then nodded. Just once. Barely perceptible. Progress, Marcus thought. He returned to his table and drank his coffee in silence, watching the dark sky slowly lighten through the steamed windows. The woman ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd learned not to waste a single crumb. When she finished, she wrapped both hands around the coffee cup again and just sat there, holding on to the warmth. This became the routine. Day after day, Marcus stopped at the cafe. Day after day, the woman was there. And day after day, he bought her breakfast without asking questions, without expecting thanks, without demanding anything in return. On the fourth day, she spoke first. "You don't have to keep doing this." Her voice was rough, like she didn't use it much. Marcus looked over from his table and shrugged. "I know." "Then why?" "Does it matter?" She considered this for a long moment, then shook her head slightly. "I guess not." On the seventh day, she told him her name. "Elena," she said quietly, not quite meeting his eyes. "My name is Elena." "Marcus," he replied. "It's good to meet you, Elena." Something shifted in her expression then, something fragile and tentative, like the first crack in ice that's been frozen solid for too long. They didn't become friends exactly. Friendship implied a level of openness, of shared history and trust that neither of them was capable of yet. But they became familiar. Two people occupying the same small space each morning, connected by routine and unspoken understanding. Marcus learned things about her in fragments, in the things she didn't say more than the things she did. He noticed the way she always sat with her back to the wall, facing the door. The way she tensed whenever the bell chimed and someone new walked in. The way she wore the same clothes day after day, not because they were her favorites, he suspected, but because they were the only ones she had. He noticed the bruises, too. They appeared and faded in a slow, sickening rotation. A mark on her wrist one week, a split lip the next. Once, a black eye so dark and swollen she could barely see out of it. On that particular morning, Marcus set down her coffee and bagel and sat down across from her without asking permission. Elena looked up, startled. "You don't have to tell me anything," Marcus said quietly, "and you don't have to do anything about it if you're not ready. But I need you to know something, okay?" She waited, her good eye fixed on him with an intensity that made him choose his next words very carefully. "Whatever's happening to you, it's not your fault, and you don't deserve it. Nobody does." Elena's face crumpled. Just for a second, a flash of such profound pain that Marcus felt it like a physical blow before she locked it down again, rebuilding the walls behind her eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. "Maybe not," Marcus agreed, "but I know what I see. And I see someone who's been hurt, someone who's surviving, and I think you're a hell of a lot stronger than you give yourself credit for." She didn't respond, just picked up her coffee with shaking hands and stared into it like it might offer absolution. Marcus left her alone after that, returned to his own table, gave her space. But the next morning when he arrived, she looked at him differently, less like a threat and more like something else, something harder to define. "Thank you," she said as he set down her breakfast. "For what?" "For not asking questions." Marcus nodded. "We all got things we're not ready to talk about." He meant it. He had his own ghosts, his own wounds that had never quite healed. The ex-wife who'd left when Lily was 18 months old, disappearing into a new life on the other side of the country without a backward glance. The job he'd lost when the company downsized, taking his benefits and his pride with it. The nights when he lay awake doing impossible math, trying to figure out how to stretch $70 across 2 weeks of groceries and gas and daycare fees. He didn't talk about those things either, didn't see the point. Talking didn't change the reality of them. But sitting here with Elena each morning, sharing coffee and silence and the weight of unspoken struggles, that changed something. Not the circumstances, maybe, but the way they felt. A little less crushing, a little more bearable. 3 weeks into their routine, Marcus noticed Paulo watching them with increasing frequency. The cafe owner never said anything directly, but Marcus caught the way his eyes followed Elena when she moved, the protective set to his shoulders when other customers came too close to her table. One morning, after Elena had left, she always left before Marcus, slipping out into the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost, Paulo brought over a fresh cup of coffee without being asked. "On the house," he said, sitting down across from Marcus. "You don't have to do that." "I know." Paulo was quiet for a moment, turning his own cup between his large, scarred hands. "That girl, she's in trouble." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think so." "You helping her?" "Trying to. In the only way she'll let me." Paulo nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with this answer. "You're a good man, Marcus Reed. Better than most." "I'm just doing what anyone should do." "But most don't." Paulo stood, patting Marcus's shoulder with one heavy hand. "Most people, they look away. Pretend they don't see. Easier that way." He headed back toward the counter, then paused. "You need anything to help this girl. You tell me, yes?" "Yeah," Marcus said, his throat unexpectedly tight. "Yeah, okay. Thanks, Paulo." After that, Marcus noticed small changes. The cafe's bathroom, which was usually kept locked, started staying open during the early morning hours. Fresh soap appeared in the dispenser. Clean towels that weren't there before. And sometimes, when Elena ordered her coffee, Paulo would add an extra pastry to her plate, waving off her obvious concern about payment. They were forming something, the three of them. Not quite a family, but maybe a safety net. A fragile web of quiet support spun across cold mornings and shared silences. Marcus found himself looking forward to these mornings in a way he hadn't anticipated. His life had become so mechanical, so focused on pure survival. Wake up, work, take care of Lily, sleep, repeat. that he'd forgotten what it felt like to connect with another adult, to matter to someone outside the narrow circle of his own immediate needs. Elena started talking more, not about the bruises or where she went when she left the cafe or who had put that haunted look in her eyes, but about small things, safe things. "I used to love winter," she said one morning, her voice soft and distant. "When I was a kid, my dad would take me ice skating every Saturday." "Yeah?" Marcus encouraged. "Yeah. There was this outdoor rink near our house. It had these lights strung up all around it, and at night..." She trailed off, lost in the memory. At night, it looked like something from a fairy tale. Marcus waited, giving her space to continue or retreat as she needed. "I haven't been skating in years," she finished quietly. "Maybe you will again," Marcus said. "Someday." She looked at him then, and for just a moment, something like hope flickered in her eyes. "Maybe..." Another morning, she asked about him. "You're always tired," she observed. "I can see it, in your eyes." Marcus huffed a quiet laugh. "That obvious, huh?" "I recognize it. That kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix." "Yeah, well, single parent, working 2 jobs when I can get them. It adds up." Elena's expression softened. "You have a kid?" "A daughter, Lily. She's 4. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her his lock screen. A photo of Lily, grinning gap-toothed at the camera, her hair in lopsided pigtails, wearing a princess costume 3 sizes too big. "She's my whole world." Elena stared at the photo for a long time. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "She's beautiful. You must be a really good dad." "I try," Marcus said. "Most days I feel like I'm failing at it, but I try." That's what matters," Elena said with such conviction it took him by surprise. "That you keep trying, that you show up. Kids remember that." There was something in the way she said it, some deeper pain or longing that made Marcus think she was speaking from experience. But he didn't push, just nodded and tucked his phone away. "You show up too," he said. "Every morning. That takes strength." Elena looked away, her jaw working. "Sometimes I don't know why I bother." "Because tomorrow might be different," Marcus said. "Because you're still here. That's enough." She didn't argue, but she didn't agree either, just wrapped her hands around her coffee and stared out the window at the dark, frozen street. The bruises got worse. By the 5th week, Elena was moving stiffly, favoring her left side. Her face was a topographical map of pain. Fresh bruises overlapping faded ones, a cut on her lip that kept reopening, shadows under her eyes so dark they looked like paint. Marcus wanted to do something, call someone, intervene somehow. But every time he considered it, he remembered the fear in her eyes that first morning, the way she'd looked ready to run at the slightest wrong move. He couldn't force her to accept help she wasn't ready for. All he could do was keep showing up, keep buying breakfast, keep providing one small, safe space in what was clearly a very unsafe world, but it was getting harder to stay silent. One morning, Elena didn't show up. Marcus sat at his usual table, coffee going cold in front of him, and watched the door. Watched the sky lighten from black to gray. Watched Paolo's expression grow increasingly concerned. She didn't come. The next day, same thing. Empty table. Growing dread. On the 3rd day, Marcus couldn't take it anymore. "Paolo," he said, "do you know where she goes after she leaves here?" The older man shook his head slowly. "She never says. I ask once, she gets scared. I don't ask again." Marcus ran his hands over his face. "What if something happened to her? What can we do? We don't know her last name, where she lives, nothing." He was right. They knew almost nothing about Elena Brooks except that she needed help and wasn't ready to accept it. Or maybe she'd been ready and something had prevented her from coming back. Something or someone. Marcus forced himself to go through his normal routine, went to work, picked up Lily from daycare, made dinner, gave her a bath, read her bedtime stories until she fell asleep with her small hand wrapped around his finger. But all the while, a cold knot of worry sat in his stomach. What if she was hurt somewhere? What if she was alone and scared and had nowhere to turn? What if he'd failed her by not doing more when he had the chance? That night, Marcus barely slept. And when his alarm went off at 4:30, he was already awake, staring at the ceiling and wrestling with guilt and helplessness in equal measure. He went to the cafe anyway. Some desperate, hopeful part of him needed to check, needed to see if maybe, just maybe, she'd be there. The cafe was empty except for Paolo, who looked up with sympathy when Marcus walked in. "Not yet," he said quietly. Marcus ordered his usual and sat down at his table, though the coffee tasted like ashes. He kept his eyes on the door, willing it to open, willing Elena to walk through it, cold and bruised but alive. The minutes crawled past, 5:15, 5:30, 5:45. Marcus was about to give up when the bell above the door chimed. His head snapped up, hope flooding through him. But it wasn't Elena. 3 men in dark suits walked in, moving with the kind of purposeful confidence that came from authority. Behind them came a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed, carrying a leather briefcase. And behind her, Marcus's breath caught. Elena. She was there, but she wasn't alone. And she looked different, clean, dressed in clothes that actually fit and weren't worn through. Her hair was pulled back, her face scrubbed, the worst of the bruises covered with makeup. But her eyes were the same, wide and frightened and fixed on Marcus like he was a lifeline in a storm. One of the suited men approached Paolo, showing him some kind of identification. The cafe owner's eyes went wide, and he nodded rapidly, gesturing toward Marcus's table. "Mr. Reed?" The man's voice was formal, professional. "I'm Special Agent Morrison with the FBI. We need to speak with you about Elena Brooks." The world tilted sideways. FBI? Marcus looked past the agent to Elena, who was standing near the door, flanked by the other 2 men and the woman with the briefcase. She mouthed something to him, 2 words that made his blood run cold. "I'm sorry." "Mr. Reed," Agent Morrison continued, "we understand you've been providing assistance to Miss Brooks over the past several weeks. Is that correct?" Marcus's mind was reeling, trying to piece together what was happening, what he'd unknowingly stumbled into. I bought her breakfast, that's all. I didn't—" "You may have saved her life," the agent said, and there was something almost gentle in his tone now. "We've been searching for Ms. Brooks for nearly 4 months. She disappeared from protective custody in August, and we had no idea where she'd gone until 2 days ago. Protective custody. 4 months. The words weren't making sense. "I don't understand," Marcus said. The woman with the briefcase stepped forward. "Mr. Reed, my name is Catherine Winters. I'm the Brooks family attorney. Perhaps we should all sit down and explain the situation." She gestured to the tables, and slowly, feeling like he was moving through water, Marcus nodded. They all sat. Paolo brought coffee without being asked, his hand shaking slightly as he set down the cups. And then, piece by impossible piece, they told Marcus the truth. Elena Brooks wasn't just a frightened woman fleeing an abusive relationship. She was the sole heir to the Brooks Whitmore fortune, a family whose wealth dated back to railroad barons and oil tycoons whose name appeared on hospitals and university buildings across 3 states. She'd been engaged to Harrison Caldwell, the son of another prominent family, in what was supposed to be a marriage that united 2 dynasties. But Harrison Caldwell was a monster. Behind closed doors, away from the cameras and society pages, he'd controlled every aspect of Elena's life. Her money, her friends, her movements. And when control wasn't enough, he'd used his fists. Elena had tried to leave twice before. Both times, Harrison's family had used their connections to find her, to bring her back, to convince her parents that she was just having pre-wedding jitters, that Harrison was a good man who loved her, that she was being dramatic. The 3rd time, she'd been smarter. She'd waited until Harrison was away on business, had emptied her account of what little money he allowed her to access, had cut her hair, left her phone, abandoned everything that could be traced, and she'd run. "She survived on the streets for 3 weeks before we found her the first time," Catherine explained, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We put her in protective custody while we built a case against Harrison, but he has resources, connections, people who owe him favors. 2 months into the custody arrangement, someone leaked her location." Elena spoke for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. "They came in the middle of the night, Harrison's men. I only got out because one of the agents, Because he... She stopped, swallowing hard. He gave his life to help me escape through a back window. Marcus felt sick. So you've been hiding here, in the city. For 4 months, Elena confirmed. No phone, no credit cards, no contact with anyone from my old life. I thought if I could just stay invisible long enough. She trailed off, shaking her head. But I was dying, slowly. The cold, the hunger, the fear, it was killing me. Until you showed up, Catherine added, looking at Marcus with something like wonder. Until you gave her a reason to keep going. Every morning she knew she could come here, knew you'd be here. It became the one constant in a world where nothing was safe. Marcus couldn't process this, couldn't reconcile the terrified woman he'd shared coffee with for 5 weeks with this heiress. This person whose disappearance had apparently mobilized the FBI. How did they find you? He asked Elena. I made a mistake, she said softly. 3 days ago. I saw a newspaper box with Harrison's photo on the front page, an article about his company's new merger, and I couldn't help myself. I stood there and read it through the glass. I didn't notice the security camera on the building behind me until it was too late. We had facial recognition software running on every camera feed in a 50-mile radius, Agent Morrison explained. The moment her face popped up, we mobilized, found her shelter, got her somewhere safe. And she told us about you, about what you'd done for her. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She crossed to Marcus's table, and before he could react, she was kneeling beside him, her eyes shining with tears. You saved me, she said, her voice breaking. When I had nothing, when I was nobody, when I couldn't offer you anything in return, you saved me anyway. Marcus shook his head, overwhelmed. I just bought you breakfast, Elena. That's all. That's everything, she insisted. Don't you see? Everyone else in my life wanted something from me. My money, my name, my connections. Harrison wanted to own me. My family wanted to control me. But you... She grabbed his hand, holding it tight between both of hers. You just wanted to make sure I didn't go hungry. You didn't even know my last name. She refused to leave the safe house until we agreed to bring her here, Catherine said. Until we agreed to let her thank you properly. I don't need thanks, Marcus said, his voice rough. I know, Elena replied. That's exactly why you deserve it. She stood, wiping her eyes, and looked at Catherine. The attorney nodded and opened her briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. Mr. Reed, Catherine said, the Brooks family would like to express their gratitude for your actions. We understand you're a single father, currently working in warehouse logistics while seeking more stable employment. We understand you've been struggling financially since your position at Meridian Industries was eliminated last year. Marcus stiffened. How do you know all that? Background check, Agent Morrison said apologetically. Standard procedure given the circumstances. We had to make sure you weren't connected to the people looking for Ms. Brooks. We also understand, Catherine continued, that you've been sending money to your daughter's mother for medical expenses, despite the fact that she abandoned her parental responsibilities and has no legal claim to your support. That hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He'd never told anyone about that, about the calls from Emily's new husband last spring, explaining that she'd gotten sick, that her insurance didn't cover everything, that they were drowning in medical bills. He'd been furious. Emily had left them, had signed away her rights to Lily without hesitation, had started a whole new life and never looked back. But she was still Lily's mother. And Lily still asked about her sometimes, in that heartbreaking way kids did, wondering why Mommy didn't visit. So Marcus sent what he could. Even though it meant choosing between gas and groceries some weeks, even though it meant he couldn't afford to fix the check engine light in his car or replace Lily's winter coat when she outgrew it. The Brooks family wants to help, Catherine said gently, if you'll allow us to. I don't want charity, Marcus said, his jaw tight. It's not charity, Elena interjected. It's gratitude. It's me trying to give back even a fraction of what you gave me. I gave you $6 worth of coffee and bagels, Elena. You gave me hope. Her voice rose, desperate. You gave me a reason to wake up every morning when every part of me wanted to just stop, to give up. Don't you understand? I was going to do it. That first morning before you walked in, I'd made up my mind. I was waiting until Paolo left to clean the kitchen, and then I was going to walk into traffic outside. Marcus felt like he'd been punched. Elena. But then you bought me breakfast, she continued, tears streaming freely now. And you didn't ask why I needed it. You didn't make me feel small or pathetic. You just gave, like it was the easiest thing in the world, like I was worth it. She took a shuddering breath. So I came back the next day to see if it was real. If you were real. And you were. Every morning, no matter what. And I started thinking, maybe if one stranger could see me as a person worth helping, maybe I was. Maybe I could survive another day. The cafe was completely silent except for Elena's quiet crying and the distant hum of the refrigeration units. Marcus looked at her. This person he'd thought he understood, whose story turned out to be so much larger and more complicated than he'd imagined, and felt something shift in his chest. Okay, he said finally. Okay, tell me what you want to do. Catherine opened the folder. The Brooks family has established a trust fund in your name and in Lily's name. The details are all here, but the simplified version is this. Your daughter's education is fully funded through graduate school, should she choose to pursue it. Your immediate debts, credit cards, medical bills, the loan on your vehicle, are settled, and you have access to a stipend that should allow you to pursue more stable employment without the immediate pressure of financial survival. Marcus stared at the papers she'd laid out before him. The numbers didn't make sense. They were too large, too impossible. This is... He couldn't finish the sentence. Life-changing, Catherine supplied. Yes, that's the intention. I can't accept this. You can, Elena said firmly, and you will. Because you taught me something, Marcus. You taught me that accepting help doesn't make you weak, that letting people who care about you offer support isn't the same as giving up your dignity. She smiled through her tears. You taught me that kindness exists without conditions. Now let me show you the same thing. But I'm not... Marcus stopped, his own voice breaking. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who bought breakfast. You're the guy who saw me when everyone else looked away, Elena corrected. You're the guy who showed up every single day and proved that consistency and compassion still exist in this world. You're the guy who saved my life without even knowing you were doing it. She reached out and squeezed his shoulder. So yes, you are special. And yes, you are a hero. My hero. Marcus looked around the cafe, at Paolo, who was crying openly now, not even bothering to hide it, at the FBI agents, who were maintaining professional composure but whose eyes were suspiciously bright, at Catherine, who was smiling softly, and finally at Elena, whose face was open and grateful and free in a way he'd never seen before. Something inside him that had been locked tight for years finally cracked open. He thought about Lily, about the life he could give her now, the opportunities, the security, the chance to be the father he'd always wanted to be without the crushing weight of financial terror constantly pulling him under. He thought about Emily's medical bills, which he could now pay in full instead of in agonizing installments. He thought about the check engine light and groceries and maybe, just maybe, a future that wasn't just about surviving, but actually living. Okay, he said again, stronger this time. Okay, I'll accept it. For Lily. For yourself, too, Elena insisted. Promise me. For yourself, too. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Catherine handed him a pen and began walking him through the paperwork, explaining each section in calm, professional tones that made the surreal feel almost manageable. As Marcus signed his name on line after line, Elena sat down beside him, not touching, just close, present. What happens now? Marcus asked when the paperwork was finished. To you, I mean. Is it over? Are you safe? Elena's smile was small but real. Harrison was arrested yesterday morning. The FBI has been building a case against him for months. Money laundering, fraud, witness tampering. They just needed me to come forward with my testimony about the abuse to tie everything together. With my family's lawyers and the evidence they've gathered, she took a deep breath. It's over, really over. He can't touch me anymore. And you're going home? Eventually, but not yet. I need time. Time to figure out who I am outside of fear, outside of control. She glanced at the window, at the growing light outside. I think I'd like to start by going ice skating, like I used to, before everything got complicated. Marcus smiled. That sounds like a good start. They sat together in comfortable silence as the cafe slowly filled with morning customers, as Paolo went back to work with periodic glances in their direction as the city outside woke up to another cold December day. But inside, surrounded by the smell of coffee and fresh bread and the warmth of unexpected connection, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in longer than he could remember. Hope. Real, tangible hope for a future that might actually be okay. Will you keep coming here? Elena asked quietly. In the mornings? Yeah, Marcus said. Yeah, I think I will. Good, because I'd like to come back too sometimes, when things settle down. I'd like to have coffee with you again. As friends this time, real friends. I'd like that, Marcus agreed. Elena stood to leave, and the agents and Catherine stood with her, preparing to escort her back to wherever she was staying now. But before she left, she turned back one last time. Thank you, Marcus, she said, for seeing me, for caring, for showing me that good people still exist. Thank you, Marcus replied, for trusting me with your mornings, for giving me purpose when I didn't know I needed it. She smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed her entire face. And then she was gone, swept out into the cold morning with her protective entourage surrounding her. Marcus sat alone at his table, the signed papers in front of him feeling both impossibly heavy and weightless at the same time. Paolo approached with fresh coffee, sitting down across from him without asking permission. That, the cafe owner said emphatically, was the most extraordinary thing I have ever seen in 40 years of owning this place. Marcus laughed, a surprised, slightly hysterical sound. Yeah, I'm still processing it. You're a good man, Marcus Reed. I told you this before, but now I say it again. A good man. I just did what anyone should do. But most don't, Paolo repeated. Most don't see. Most don't care. Most people are too busy with their own problems to notice someone else is drowning. He raised his coffee cup in a small salute. But you noticed. You cared. And now look what happened. Marcus shook his head, still unable to fully comprehend the morning's events. My daughter's college is paid for, Paolo. Her college. I can't even... Then don't try, Paolo advised kindly. Just accept the blessing. Let yourself be helped the way you helped that girl. Is what she would want, yes? Yeah, Marcus agreed softly. Yeah, it is. They drank their coffee in companionable silence as the sun finally crested the horizon, painting the frozen city in shades of gold and pink. Marcus thought about Lily, who'd be waking up soon in their tiny apartment, excited for another day of preschool and graham crackers and the simple joys of being 4 years old. He thought about telling her that things were going to be different now. Better. That Daddy didn't have to work so much anymore. That they could maybe move to a nicer place, somewhere with a yard where she could play. He thought about Elena, about the journey she still had ahead of her, rebuilding a life that had been shattered, about the courage it must have taken to keep showing up every morning when everything in her world was hostile and dangerous. And he thought about the strange, unpredictable nature of kindness, how the smallest gestures could ripple outward in ways you never expected, touching lives and changing futures in ways that seemed almost magical in their scope. $5.50. That's all it had cost him to save Elena Brooks' life. $5.50, repeated morning after morning, building a foundation of trust and human connection strong enough to keep someone tethered to the world when they were ready to let go. Marcus finished his coffee and checked the time. He needed to get home, wake up Lily, start their day. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't dreading it, wasn't already exhausted by the thought of everything ahead. He was hopeful. He gathered the papers Catherine had left him, carefully folding them into his jacket pocket. Tomorrow, he'd read through them properly, start making plans, figure out what this new reality meant in practical terms. But today, he was just going to hold his daughter and be grateful. Grateful that he'd walked into the cafe on that cold morning 5 weeks ago. Grateful that he'd noticed the woman in the corner. Grateful that he'd made the choice to care. As Marcus stood and headed for the door, Paolo called out to him. Same time tomorrow? Marcus smiled. Same time tomorrow. The bell chimed as he stepped outside, and the cold air hit him like a wall. But somehow, it didn't feel as harsh as it had before. Marcus Reed walked down the frozen street toward the bus stop, toward his daughter, toward a future that had just gotten infinitely brighter. And somewhere across the city, Elena Brooks was starting her own journey toward healing, carrying with her the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, kindness could still break through. That one person's small, consistent acts of compassion could be enough to save a life. That hope could be found in a cup of coffee and a bagel, offered without expectation, accepted with gratitude, and transformed into something beautiful. The morning rush was beginning, people pouring out of buildings and into the streets, everyone caught up in their own struggles and stories. Marcus wondered how many of them were one kind gesture away from changing someone's life. How many small opportunities for compassion passed by unnoticed every single day. He made a silent promise to himself and to Elena. He wouldn't stop seeing people, wouldn't let the weight of his own problems blind him to others who needed help. Because if the last 5 weeks had taught him anything, it was that we're all connected in ways we can't always see. That the stranger sitting alone at a cafe might be fighting battles we can't imagine. And that the simple act of showing up, consistently, compassionately, without judgment, might be exactly what someone needs to survive another day. Marcus reached the bus stop and settled in to wait, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The city hummed around him, indifferent and endless. But somewhere in that vast urban landscape, 2 lives had intersected in a dingy corner cafe, creating ripples that would continue spreading outward for years to come. And that, Marcus thought, was something worth believing in. The apartment felt different when Marcus walked through the door that morning. Nothing had physically changed. The same water-stained ceiling, the same threadbare carpet, the same persistent draft that whistled through the window frame no matter how much weather stripping he applied. But Marcus himself had changed, and that altered everything. He moved through the familiar space like a man waking from a long sleep, seeing possibilities where before he'd only seen limitations. Lily was still asleep in her small bedroom, the door cracked open just enough for Marcus to hear her if she needed him. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of her breathing beneath her princess comforter, a thrift store find he'd washed 3 times before letting her use it. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, completely unaware that their entire world had just shifted on its axis. How do you tell a 4-year-old that everything's going to be okay now? That the fear her father tried so hard to hide, the stress that made his jaw tight and his hands shake when the bills came, was finally, miraculously lifting. Marcus didn't have those answers yet, so he did what he always did, started the coffee maker, checked the contents of the refrigerator, and began preparing for another day. Except today wasn't just another day. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. Marcus hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Reed, this is Catherine Winters. I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, I'm up. I'm always up." "Of course." There was a smile in her voice. "I wanted to let you know that the fund transfers will be processed by end of business today. You should see the accounts active by tomorrow morning. I'm also emailing you contact information for a financial advisor who specializes in helping people navigate sudden changes in their economic circumstances. Her name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and she's expecting your call." Marcus sat down heavily at his small kitchen table. This is really happening. It really is. I also wanted to discuss something else, if you have a moment. Sure. The Brooks family would like to meet you, properly. Elena's parents, specifically. They're flying in from Boston this weekend, and they've requested the opportunity to thank you in person. Catherine paused. There's no pressure, of course. If you'd prefer to keep this arrangement purely administrative, they'll understand. But they wanted me to extend the invitation. Meeting Elena's parents, the railroad and oil money people, the kind of wealthy that had security details and family attorneys on speed dial. I don't know, Marcus said honestly. I don't belong in that world. Neither did Elena, apparently, despite being born into it. I think that might be part of why she connected with you. Catherine's voice was gentle, understanding. Think about it, no rush. You can let me know later this week. After they hung up, Marcus sat in the quiet kitchen as dawn light filtered through the thin curtains. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the apartment with the smell of cheap grocery store blend. In a few hours, his daughter would wake up demanding pancakes and cartoons. He'd take her to daycare, go to his shift at the warehouse, and move through the familiar rhythms of their life. But underneath it all, everything had fundamentally changed. The sound of small feet padding across carpet pulled Marcus from his thoughts. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark curls wild from sleep, dragging her stuffed rabbit by one ear. "Morning, Princess," Marcus said, opening his arms. She climbed into his lap without hesitation, still warm and soft from bed. "Is it pancake day?" "It can be pancake day. Chocolate chips?" "We'll see what we have." They didn't have chocolate chips. Marcus knew this because he'd memorized the contents of their pantry down to the last can of beans. But watching Lily's hopeful face, he made a different calculation than he usually did. "Actually, you know what? Let's go to the store. Get chocolate chips and fresh strawberries. Make it a special breakfast." Lily's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? But it's not my birthday. Doesn't have to be your birthday for pancakes to be special." The grocery store trip was revelatory in ways Marcus hadn't anticipated. Walking down the aisles without the constant mental arithmetic of what he could afford versus what they needed felt like breathing without a weight on his chest. He bought the chocolate chips and the strawberries, and when Lily asked if they could get the good orange juice instead of the frozen concentrate, he said yes to that too. At checkout, the total came to $43.67. Marcus's hand didn't shake when he swiped his card, didn't hold his breath, waiting for it to be declined. Just paid and walked out into the cold morning with his daughter chattering happily about pancakes and whether Daddy could make them shaped like hearts. Back home, Marcus made an elaborate mess of the tiny kitchen. Lily stood on a chair beside him, helping by dumping in chocolate chips with enthusiastic abandon and getting flour on every possible surface. She laughed when he flipped a pancake too enthusiastically, and it landed on the floor. And Marcus laughed too, really laughed, deep and genuine, in a way he couldn't remember doing in months. "Daddy's silly," Lily declared. "Daddy's very silly," Marcus agreed, scooping her up and spinning her around while she shrieked with delight. This was what the money meant, not the numbers in a bank account or the paid-off debts. This, the ability to be present with his daughter, to be silly and spontaneous and not constantly calculating whether they could afford one more day of existence. Over chocolate chip pancakes drowning in syrup, Lily talked about her friend Madison at daycare, about the songs they were learning, about how she wanted to be an astronaut princess when she grew up. Marcus listened, really listened, without half his mind on the bills due next week or the shift schedule or the check engine light. "Daddy?" Lily said suddenly, her expression turning serious. "Are you happy?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart? You're smiling different, like—" She scrunched up her face, thinking hard. "Like you smile in the pictures from before." Before Emily left, before the layoff, before life became about survival instead of living. "Yeah, baby," Marcus said, his throat tight. "I am happy, really happy." "Good." Lily nodded decisively and went back to her pancakes. The matter settled in the simple way of children. Marcus took Lily to daycare after breakfast, and her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, greeted them at the door with her usual warm smile. "Good morning, Lily. Ready for a fun day?" "We made special pancakes," Lily announced, "with chocolate chips and strawberries." "Wow, that sounds delicious." As Lily ran off to join her friends at the art table, Mrs. Rodriguez touched Marcus's arm lightly. "Mr. Reed, could I speak with you for just a moment?" Marcus's old instincts kicked in immediately, the fear that he'd fallen behind on payments, that there was a problem, that something else was about to go wrong. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," she assured him quickly. "I just wanted to let you know that Lily's been doing wonderfully. Her social skills, her creativity, her curiosity about everything, she's thriving." Mrs. Rodriguez hesitated, then continued more softly. "I also wanted to say, I see how hard you work for her, how much you care. It shows in who she's becoming. You're doing a great job." The unexpected kindness hit Marcus harder than it should have. He'd been operating on empty for so long, running on fumes and determination and the desperate need to keep his daughter safe and happy, that hearing someone acknowledge it felt like a balm on wounds he hadn't realized were still bleeding. Thank you, he managed. That means a lot. She's lucky to have you. Marcus drove to work with Mrs. Rodriguez's words echoing in his head. The warehouse where he'd been working for the past 6 months loomed ahead, a massive concrete structure on the industrial edge of the city. He parked in his usual spot and sat for a moment, staring at the building. He didn't have to be here anymore. The realization settled over him slowly. With the trust fund, the stipend, the financial security Catherine had outlined, he could quit. Could walk away from the grueling 10-hour shifts, the mandatory overtime, the supervisor who treated workers like interchangeable parts in a machine. But quitting without notice felt wrong. These people had given him a job when he desperately needed one. Showing up was the least he could do while he figured out what came next. Marcus's shift supervisor, a perpetually stressed woman named Janet, was surprised when he asked to speak with her during lunch break. "I need to give my 2 weeks' notice," Marcus said. "I know it's sudden, but some things in my personal situation have changed, and I need to make a transition." Janet blinked at him. "You got another job offer?" "Something like that." "Well?" She shuffled some papers on her desk, clearly flustered. "I'm sorry to lose you, Marcus. You're one of the reliable ones. Lord knows we don't have enough of those." She paused. "Is there anything I can do to convince you to stay? Different shift? Slight pay bump?" The old Marcus, the desperate one, the one who would have done anything to keep food on the table, would have felt tempted. But the new reality allowed him to be honest. "I appreciate that, but no. It's time for me to move on. Focus more on my daughter. Maybe go back to school. Figure out what I actually want to do instead of just what I have to do." Janet smiled, and it softened her usually harried expression. "Good for you. Really, I hope it works out." The rest of the shift felt surreal. Marcus went through the motions of loading and unloading shipments, organizing inventory, scanning barcodes, but his mind was elsewhere, already spinning through possibilities he'd forced himself not to consider before. He could finish his degree. He'd been 2 semesters away from a bachelor's in business administration when Emily got pregnant and everything derailed. The courses he'd loved, organizational psychology, strategic management, the way systems could be built to support people instead of grinding them down. He could spend real time with Lily, not just the exhausted hours after work when he was too tired to do more than make dinner and supervise bath time, but actual quality time, parks and museums and library story hours. All the things he'd been too stressed and stretched thin to prioritize. He could sleep. Actual, restorative sleep without lying awake calculating which bills to pay first, whether they could survive on ramen for another week, how long the car would last before something catastrophic broke. During his afternoon break, Marcus found a quiet corner and called the number Catherine had given him. Dr. Sarah Chen answered on the second ring. "Mr. Reed, I've been expecting your call. Catherine briefed me on your situation. How are you feeling about all of this?" "Overwhelmed," Marcus admitted. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me it's a mistake, that the numbers are wrong, or there's been some kind of error. That's a completely normal response to sudden financial change." Dr. Chen's voice was calm, professional, but warm. "What I do is help people navigate these transitions in healthy, sustainable ways. The psychology of money is complicated, and when someone goes from scarcity to security very quickly, it can create stress in unexpected ways." I didn't realize there was a psychology to it. "Oh, absolutely. How we think about money is shaped by our experiences with it. You've been in survival mode for a long time, Marcus. Learning to operate from a place of security instead of fear takes practice." She paused. "I'd like to schedule some sessions with you. We can work on financial planning, yes, but also on the emotional and psychological aspects of this transition. Help you build a healthy relationship with this new reality." They scheduled their first appointment for the following week. After hanging up, Marcus felt a strange mixture of relief and vulnerability. The idea that he needed help processing good fortune felt almost absurd. Wasn't this what everyone wanted? Wasn't financial security supposed to solve problems, not create new ones? But Dr. Chen was right. He'd been operating in crisis mode for so long that he didn't know how to function any other way. The constant vigilance, the endless contingency planning, the assumption that catastrophe was always one missed paycheck away, those patterns didn't just disappear because the circumstances changed. That evening, after picking up Lily from daycare, Marcus made another decision. He drove to a different part of town, to a small brick house with a neat yard and a porch swing. His mother's house. Diane Reed answered the door in her usual outfit, comfortable jeans, an oversized cardigan, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Her face lit up when she saw them. "Marcus, and my sweet Lily, what a wonderful surprise." "Hi, Grandma." Lily launched herself forward for a hug. Come in, come in. I just made coffee, and I think there might be cookies somewhere." Inside, the house smelled like vanilla and old books. Marcus's mother had always been a reader, and her living room was lined with overflowing bookshelves. Lily made a beeline for the toy basket his mother kept specifically for her visits, pulling out blocks and dolls with happy familiarity. Diane poured coffee and settled onto the couch beside Marcus. "You look different." "Different how?" "Less tired, less," she searched for the word, "less like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." Marcus took a deep breath. "Mom, something happened, something big, and I need to tell you about it." He explained everything: the cafe, Elena, the revelation, the trust fund. His mother listened in stunned silence, her coffee growing cold in her hands. "Oh, Marcus," she whispered when he finished. "Oh, sweetheart. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like a miracle." Diane set down her coffee cup, her hand shaking slightly. "Do you know how many nights I've laid awake worrying about you? Watching you work yourself to exhaustion, spreading yourself so thin, and not being able to help more than I already do?" "Mom, you help plenty. The babysitting, it's not enough. It's never been enough, and I've hated it. Hated watching my son struggle and not having the resources to fix it." Tears welled in her eyes. "But this is, I don't even have words." Marcus moved closer, putting his arm around her shoulders. "I wanted you to know, and I wanted to say that things are going to be different now. Better. I can actually support Lily properly, and you won't have to worry so much, and you can breathe," Diane finished. "That's what I want for you most of all, Marcus. The chance to breathe. To live instead of just survive." They sat together in comfortable silence while Lily played, building elaborate block towers and narrating complex stories to her dolls. Watching her, Marcus felt the full weight of what had changed. His daughter would never have to know the kind of stress he'd been living under, would never have to hear the tension in his voice when bills came, or see him skip meals so she could eat. She would have opportunities, education, security, the freedom to dream without the limitations of poverty crushing those dreams before they fully formed. "There's something else," Marcus said. "Elena's parents want to meet me. They're flying in this weekend." Diane raised her eyebrows. "The railroad and oil money parents?" "Those ones. Are you going to do it?" "I don't know. What would we even talk about? I'm a warehouse worker who didn't finish college. He gestured helplessly. "They're not my people, Mom." "They're the parents of someone whose life you saved," Diane said firmly. "That makes them exactly your people, whether you share a tax bracket or not." She squeezed his hand. "Go meet them, Marcus. Let them thank you. Let yourself be acknowledged for the good thing you did." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been this wise. You just don't listen." She smiled. "But you're listening now, and that's what matters." Marcus stayed for dinner, his mother's pot roast, which Lily devoured with enthusiasm, and didn't leave until well after dark. Driving home through the quiet streets, his daughter asleep in the back seat, Marcus felt a sense of contentment he'd almost forgotten was possible. The next few days passed in a blur of adjustments and small revelations. Marcus's debts disappeared overnight. Catherine had been true to her word. His credit card balance zeroed out. The medical bills from Emily's treatment paid in full. The car loan settled. Even the parking tickets he'd been avoiding dealing with were mysteriously resolved. It felt like magic, like someone had taken an eraser to all the red ink that had dominated his life and left only blank space, ready to be filled with something new. On Thursday evening, Marcus's phone rang. Elena's name appeared on the screen. She'd given him her number before leaving the cafe, insisting they stay in touch. "Hey," Marcus answered. "How are you doing?" "Better. Therapy helps. Being safe helps." Her voice sounded stronger than it had in the cafe, less fragile. "I'm calling because I heard my parents want to meet you this weekend." Yeah, Catherine mentioned it. You sound nervous. I am nervous. I don't know how to talk to people like that. Elena laughed, and it was such a normal, unguarded sound that it made Marcus smile. People like what? Rich people? Marcus, they're just people. Worried parents who are grateful someone kept their daughter alive. That's all. Easy for you to say. You grew up with them. And spent the last year being controlled and abused by someone from the same world, then 4 months hiding on the streets. Trust me when I tell you that wealth and class don't make people better or worse. Just people. She paused. Besides, they're nervous too. They're nervous. Why? Because they know what you did for me, what you gave when you had almost nothing, and they want to make sure they honor that properly without making you feel uncomfortable or obligated. Elena's voice softened. My dad cried when I told him about the cafe, about you showing up every morning with coffee and a bagel. He said he'd spent millions on security and investigators and lawyers, and none of it mattered as much as one stranger's kindness. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I really didn't do anything special, Elena. Stop saying that. You did everything that mattered. She took a breath. Will you meet them, please? It would mean a lot to me, and to them. Okay, Marcus heard himself say. Okay, I'll do it. Thank you. The relief in her voice was palpable. Saturday afternoon, Catherine will send you the details. And Marcus? Just be yourself. That's all they want to see. The person who saw me when I needed it most. After they hung up, Marcus sat on his small couch and stared at the ceiling, trying to imagine what Saturday would bring, trying to picture himself sitting across from people whose world was so different from his own it might as well be another planet. But Elena was right. At the end of the day, they were just people, parents who'd almost lost their daughter and wanted to thank the person who'd helped save her. He could do that. He could show up and be honest and let them express their gratitude, even if it made him uncomfortable. Friday morning, Marcus returned to the cafe. Paulo's face broke into a huge grin when he walked through the door. Marcus, I was hoping you'd come back. Had to check on you, make sure you're not getting too famous now that you're part of the incredible rescue story. Paulo laughed, waving dismissively. Who would care about old Paulo? You're the hero. Pretty sure we're all just regular people who did what anyone should do. But most people don't. Paulo poured coffee without asking, adding a pastry Marcus definitely hadn't ordered. On the house, forever. You never pay here again. Paulo, come on. No arguing. This is my cafe. My rules. You save that girl. You drink free coffee for life. This is how it works. Marcus accepted the gesture with gratitude, settling into his usual table. The cafe felt different now, charged with memory and significance. This was where it had all started, where two broken people had found each other in the cold darkness and built something that changed both their lives. Other customers came and went, oblivious to the history contained in these walls. Marcus wondered how many other small miracles happened every day in places just like this, unnoticed and uncelebrated. How many lives intersected in ways that mattered, but never made the news or changed anyone's bank account. His phone buzzed. An email from Catherine with details for Saturday's meeting. A restaurant, high-end but not ostentatious, she noted, chosen specifically to be comfortable rather than intimidating. 2:00. Just him and Elena's parents, with Catherine present to facilitate if needed. Marcus read the email 3 times, his anxiety rising with each read. Then he remembered what Elena had said. Just be yourself. He could do that. He'd been himself his entire life, for better or worse. No reason to stop now. Saturday arrived too quickly. Marcus dropped Lily off at his mother's house, ignoring Diane's knowing smile and her instructions to just breathe and be honest. He drove to the restaurant in his best clothes, khakis and a button-down that had survived from his old office job, a little worn but clean and pressed. The restaurant was in a part of the city Marcus rarely visited, where the buildings were renovated brick and the sidewalks were actually maintained. Inside, warm lighting and soft music created an atmosphere of quiet sophistication without being pretentious. Catherine was waiting near the entrance, and her smile was reassuring. Marcus, you look great. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be. They're lovely people, I promise. Just follow my lead and remember, You're not on trial here. This is simply an opportunity for gratitude. She guided him to a private corner table where an older couple waited. The man stood immediately, extending his hand. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and Elena's eyes. The woman remained seated, but her expression was warm, open. "Mr. Reed," the man said, "I'm Robert Brooks, and this is my wife, Patricia. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us." Marcus shook his hand, surprised by the genuine emotion in Robert's grip. "Please, call me Marcus." "Then you must call us Robert and Patricia," Patricia said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Please, sit. We've been looking forward to this." The initial awkwardness Marcus had feared never materialized. Robert and Patricia didn't treat him like a curiosity or a charity case. They asked about Lily, about his work, about his life with genuine interest and no trace of condescension. Patricia showed him photos of Elena as a child, a laughing girl with scraped knees and wild hair, so different from the frightened woman Marcus had first met. "She was always so full of life," Patricia said, her voice catching. "Fearless and curious and kind. And then Harrison?" She couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. "We failed her," Robert said bluntly. "We saw the warning signs and convinced ourselves we were wrong, that we were being overprotective parents who couldn't accept their daughter growing up. We chose comfort over courage, and it nearly cost us everything." "You found her eventually," Marcus offered, "after she'd been gone for months, after she'd lived on the streets, starving and terrified, after she'd been ready to give up entirely." Robert's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "But you didn't fail her, Marcus. You saw someone in pain and you helped, no questions asked. You gave her hope when she had none left." Patricia reached across the table, taking Marcus's hand in both of hers. "Our daughter is alive because of you. Do you understand that? Not because of our money or our resources or our connections, because one person chose kindness over indifference." Marcus didn't know what to say. The weight of their gratitude, their grief, their relief, it was overwhelming in a way he hadn't anticipated. "I just bought her breakfast," he said finally, his voice rough. "That's all." "That's everything," Patricia echoed Elena's words. "You gave her a reason to survive. Every single morning she knew you'd be there. That consistency, that reliability, that simple human connection, it saved her life." They talked for hours. Marcus learned about Elena's childhood, her love of art and music, her dreams of running a foundation that helped domestic violence survivors. Robert talked about the case against Harrison Caldwell, the evidence that had been building, the satisfaction of watching the man who'd hurt his daughter finally face consequences. "He took a plea deal," Robert said with grim satisfaction. 15 years minimum. He'll be an old man when he gets out, and his family's reputation is destroyed. It's not enough for what he did, but it's something. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself relaxing. These weren't the intimidating wealthy elite he'd feared. They were grieving parents trying to rebuild a relationship with a daughter they'd almost lost. People who understood, perhaps better than most, that money couldn't solve everything. When the check came, Robert handled it smoothly, and Marcus didn't protest. This was their gesture, their way of showing gratitude, and he was learning to accept such things gracefully. As they prepared to leave, Patricia pulled Marcus aside. "Elena wants to start a foundation," she said quietly, "to help people in situations like hers, people trying to escape abuse, trying to rebuild their lives. She'd like you to be involved, if you're interested. Not just financially, but in shaping what it becomes. Your perspective, your understanding of what it's like to struggle, it's valuable in ways our wealth can never be." Marcus was stunned. "I don't know anything about running a foundation." "But you know about surviving against the odds, about maintaining dignity and compassion even when circumstances try to strip both away. That's the expertise we need." Patricia squeezed his arm gently. "Think about it. There's no pressure, but the offer stands." Walking to his car afterward, Marcus felt like he was floating. The afternoon had been nothing like he'd feared. Instead of judgment or awkwardness, he'd found connection, common ground and shared humanity, despite the vast differences in their circumstances. His phone rang as he reached his car. "Elena." "How did it go?" she asked immediately. Better than I expected. Your parents are good people. They are. They just... They made mistakes. We all did. She paused. They told me about the foundation idea, about asking you to be involved. Yeah, I'm still processing that. You don't have to decide now. But Marcus? Her voice grew serious. You have a gift for seeing people, for understanding what they need without them having to ask. That's rare, and it could help a lot of people who are where I was. Marcus leaned against his car, watching traffic flow past on the busy street. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. Elena's tone lightened. Hey, I'm going ice skating tomorrow, at the outdoor rink downtown. Want to bring Lily? I'd love to meet her. You sure you want to deal with a hyperactive 4-year-old? Absolutely. I think I need to remember what it's like to just play. To be around someone whose biggest worry is whether her hot chocolate has enough marshmallows. Marcus laughed. All right, text me the details. That night, tucking Lily into bed, Marcus tried to explain what was happening without overwhelming her. Remember how Daddy told you we were going to have some nice changes, that things were going to be a little easier? Lily nodded solemnly, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Well, it's because Daddy helped someone who needed help, and now they want to help us back. And tomorrow we're going to go ice skating with a new friend. Will she like me? She's going to love you. How could she not? Lily considered this. Can we get hot chocolate after? Absolutely. With marshmallows? With all the marshmallows you want. Satisfied, Lily snuggled deeper under her covers. Daddy, are we going to be okay now? The question hit Marcus square in the chest. He'd thought he'd been hiding his stress so well, protecting her from the weight of their struggles. But kids noticed everything. Yeah, baby, he said, smoothing her wild curls. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be great. Good, Lily mumbled, already half asleep. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, Princess. More than anything. Marcus sat beside her bed until her breathing evened out into sleep, then moved to the small living room. The apartment felt different now, not physically, but in the way it existed in his mind. This wasn't a trap anymore, just a temporary space while he figured out what came next. He could move. Get Lily a room that was bigger than a closet, with actual space for her toys and books. Find a place with a yard where she could play. Maybe even adopt the dog she'd been asking for. But he wasn't in a rush. There was time now. Time to make good decisions instead of desperate ones. Time to plan instead of just react. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. A photo of an ice rink lit up at night, beautiful and festive. The message read, Tomorrow. Can't wait. Marcus smiled and sent back a simple thumbs up. Tomorrow, he'd take his daughter ice skating. Next week, he'd meet with Dr. Chen and start building a healthier relationship with money. In 2 weeks, he'd finish his notice at the warehouse and begin exploring what he actually wanted to do with his life. The future, for the first time in longer than he could remember, felt full of possibility instead of dread. And it all started because he'd bought a stranger breakfast in a corner cafe on the coldest morning of winter. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. The ice rink downtown was transformed into something magical on Sunday afternoon. White lights were strung overhead in crisscrossing patterns, and holiday music drifted through speakers hidden among the surrounding buildings. The cold that had felt so brutal just weeks ago now seemed festive, part of the winter charm rather than a threat. Marcus stood at the edge of the rink, holding Lily's hand while she bounced on her toes with barely contained excitement. She wore her new winter coat, one that actually fit, that Marcus had bought without checking the price tag 3 times first, and a knit hat with a pom-pom that kept sliding over her eyes. Do you see her yet, Daddy? Lily asked for the 5th time in as many minutes. Not yet, Princess, but she'll be here. What if she doesn't come? She'll come. She promised. And Elena did come, appearing through the crowd with a tentative smile that grew wider when she spotted them. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked more like the girl in Patricia's childhood photos than the haunted woman from the cafe. The bruises had faded, the shadows under her eyes had lightened, and there was a spark of something hopeful in her expression. Marcus, she said warmly, then dropped into a crouch to be at Lily's eye level. And you must be Lily. Your dad has told me so much about you. Lily suddenly went shy, pressing against Marcus's leg. Hi. I love your hat. Is that a penguin on it? Lily touched the embroidered penguin on her hat and nodded. Penguins are my favorite. Did you know they mate for life? They find one partner and stick with them forever. Like Mommy and Daddy? Lily asked, then seemed to remember something. Oh, but Mommy left. Marcus felt the familiar ache in his chest, but Elena handled it with grace. Sometimes people make mistakes, but your daddy didn't. He stayed, and that's what matters most. Lily considered this seriously, then apparently decided Elena had passed some internal test. Do you know how to ice skate? I used to. It's been a long time, though. I might be pretty wobbly. That's okay. Daddy says everybody wobbles when they're learning. Then we can wobble together. Deal? Deal. They rented skates and made their way onto the ice. Marcus hadn't skated since he was a teenager, and his ankles immediately protested the unfamiliar position. Lily clung to his hand, her feet sliding out from under her every few seconds, giggling each time she caught herself. Elena started out gripping the wall, moving in careful, halting steps. But gradually, muscle memory returned. Elena's movements became smoother, more confident. She let go of the wall and glided a few feet, then a few more, her face lighting up with surprised delight. I remember, she called out. Marcus, I actually remember how to do this. Marcus watched her pick up speed, watched her execute a careful turn, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. This was what healing looked like, not the absence of scars, but the reclaiming of joy that had been stolen. Lily, determined not to be outdone, demanded Marcus let go of her hand. She lasted about 3 seconds before her legs went in opposite directions and she landed hard on her bottom. But instead of crying, she laughed, a pure, delighted sound that made several other skaters smile. Again, Daddy, let me try again. They spent 2 hours on the ice. Elena taught Lily how to push off with one foot, how to bend her knees for balance. Marcus fell twice, much to his daughter's amusement, and Elena only laughed when he complained about his dignity. Other families swirled around them, caught up in their own Sunday afternoon adventures, and for a little while they were just 3 people having fun. No trauma, no trust funds, no heavy conversations about abuse or survival or gratitude, just skating and laughter and the simple pleasure of being present in a moment. Afterward, true to his promise, Marcus took them for hot chocolate at a cafe near the rink. Lily insisted Elena sit next to her in the booth and proceeded to talk nonstop about everything from her favorite cartoon to the elaborate imaginary world she'd created for her stuffed animals. Elena listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions, and Marcus saw something shift in her with each passing minute. She was remembering how to be a person again, how to exist outside of fear and survival mode, how to connect without calculating the risk. She's wonderful, Elena said quietly when Lily excused herself to look at the pastries in the display case, her hot chocolate mustache making her look even more adorable. She's my whole world, Marcus replied. Everything I do, it's for her. I can see that, and see. The way she looks at you, the confidence she has, that comes from feeling safe and loved. Elena wrapped her hands around her mug. My parents loved me too, but they were so busy trying to control my life that they forgot to just be with me, to let me make mistakes and learn from them. Is that getting better? With them? Slowly. We're in family therapy together, which is weird and uncomfortable and necessary. She smiled slightly. Dr. Keating, my therapist, says healing isn't linear. Some days I wake up angry at them for not protecting me better. Other days I understand they were doing the best they could with the tools they had. That's a pretty mature perspective. Trauma ages you fast. Elena's expression darkened briefly, then cleared with visible effort. But I'm trying not to let it define me. That's what Harrison wanted, to make me small and afraid and powerless. Rebuilding myself into someone who isn't any of those things feels like the best revenge. Lily returned to the table, announcing she wanted the cookie shaped like a snowman, and Elena helped her break it into pieces they could share. Watching them together, Marcus felt a deep sense of rightness. These two people who'd both been broken in different ways, finding connection and healing in each other's presence. When it was time to leave, Lily hugged Elena goodbye with the unself-conscious affection of children. Can we skate again sometime? I'd love that, Elena said, hugging her back. Maybe next weekend? Yes, Daddy, did you hear? Next weekend. I heard, Princess. After dropping Lily off with his mother for a promised sleepover involving movies and far too much candy, Marcus found himself driving aimlessly through the city. His mind was full, processing the changes of the past weeks, the strangeness of his new reality. His phone rang. Catherine Winters. Marcus, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. No, just driving. What's up? I wanted to give you a heads up about something. There's been some media interest in Elena's story. Nothing we can't manage, but it's possible your name might come up. How do you feel about that? Marcus's stomach dropped. Media interest? Like news stories? Elena's return has drawn attention, particularly given her family's prominence in Harrison's arrest. The narrative of an heiress escaping abuse and surviving on the streets is compelling to journalists. Catherine's tone was careful. Elena has been very clear that she won't do interviews, but reporters have been digging. They've found out about the cafe, about someone who helped her. We've managed to keep your identity private so far, but I can't guarantee that will last. What happens if they figure out who I am? Realistically, you'd probably get interview requests. Maybe some unwanted attention for a while. It would die down eventually, but I won't lie to you. It could be intrusive. Catherine paused. Elena feels terrible about this. She never wanted to put you in that position. It's not her fault. No, but that doesn't make it less stressful for you. I wanted to give you time to prepare. Maybe think about how you'd want to handle it if reporters do come calling. After hanging up, Marcus pulled into an empty parking lot and sat there, trying to process this new complication. He'd helped Elena because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted recognition or attention. The idea of reporters asking questions, digging into his life, possibly talking to his neighbors or his employer, it made his skin crawl. But what could he do about it? He couldn't erase what had happened, couldn't undo the kindness that had led to all of this. He called his mother. Marcus? Everything okay? Define okay. He explained the situation, the media interest, the possibility of exposure. Diane was quiet for a long moment. How do you feel about it? Scared? Uncomfortable? Like I'm losing control of my own story? Then don't talk to them. You don't owe reporters anything. Elena's story is hers to tell or not tell. Yours is the same. But what if they show up at my door? What if they bother Lily? Then we deal with it together. Marcus, you did nothing wrong. You helped someone who needed help. If that becomes public knowledge, then so be it. Anyone who judges you for that isn't worth your concern. His mother's certainty helped, but the anxiety lingered. That night, lying in his quiet apartment, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept imagining scenarios, reporters ambushing him at work, photographers following Lily to daycare, his private struggles becoming public fodder. The next morning, exhausted and on edge, Marcus arrived at the warehouse for another shift. Janet pulled him aside almost immediately. Marcus, there was someone here asking about you yesterday. A woman with a camera crew. His worst fears confirmed. What did you tell her? Nothing. Told her we don't give out employee information and escorted her off the property. Janet's expression was concerned. Want to tell me what's going on? Marcus debated how much to say, then decided honesty was simpler. He gave her the abbreviated version, helping someone in trouble, unexpected consequences, unwanted attention. Janet listened with increasing surprise. So you're actually a hero, and now the media wants to turn it into a circus. I'm not a hero. I just bought someone breakfast. Marcus, you saved someone's life. That's literally the definition of heroic. She shook her head. Look, I can't control what happens outside this building, but I can make sure you're not bothered while you're on my clock. If anyone else shows up, I'll handle it. Thanks, Janet. No problem. And hey, good for you. Seriously, the world needs more people willing to actually help instead of just walking by. The shift passed without incident, but Marcus remained on edge. During his lunch break, he called Catherine back. They found my workplace. Tried to interview my supervisor. Catherine swore, which was so out of character that Marcus almost smiled despite his stress. I'm sorry, Marcus. This is escalating faster than we anticipated. Elena is considering making a statement, something brief that acknowledges she received help, but specifically requests privacy for everyone involved. Will that work? Maybe. Maybe not. But it's worth trying. Catherine hesitated. There's another option. You could do one interview, controlled circumstances, carefully managed. Get your version of the story out there on your terms, then refuse all further requests. Sometimes giving them something reduces the feeding frenzy. I don't want to do interviews. I understand. It's just an option. That evening, Elena called. Her voice was tight with distress. Marcus, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have thought about this, should have protected you better. Elena, you can't control what the media does. But I can control what I do, and I'm going to fix this. She took a shaky breath. I'm scheduling a press conference for tomorrow. I'll make a statement about my experience, about the importance of helping domestic violence survivors, and I'll specifically ask that the people who helped me be left alone. It won't stop everyone, but it might help. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. You gave me my life back, Marcus. The least I can do is try to protect your privacy. Her voice cracked. I never wanted this for you, never wanted any of this to become public. I know. It's okay. It's not okay, but I'm going to try to make it better. The press conference aired the next afternoon. Marcus watched it on his phone during his break, hiding in the warehouse bathroom for privacy. Elena stood at a podium, flanked by her parents and Catherine, looking composed but vulnerable. She spoke clearly and firmly about her experience with Harrison, about the reality of domestic violence, about the importance of believing survivors. Then she addressed Marcus, though she never said his name. During the darkest period of my life, I received help from ordinary people who showed extraordinary compassion. They asked for nothing in return. They expected no recognition. They simply saw someone in need and responded with kindness. Her voice strengthened. Those people deserve privacy and respect. They deserve to return to their lives without harassment or intrusion. I'm asking, I'm begging, the media to honor that. Tell my story if you must, but leave them alone. They didn't ask for any of this. They were just being human in the best possible way. She took questions briefly, deflecting any that tried to identify Marcus or get details about the cafe. When one reporter pushed too hard asking if the man who helped her deserved recognition, Elena's response was sharp. He deserves peace. He deserves to live his life without cameras and questions and people treating him like a curiosity. What he did was beautiful because it was private and personal and without expectation of reward. Making it public diminishes that. The reporter tried to argue, but Catherine stepped in, ending the press conference smoothly. Marcus's phone immediately started buzzing with texts. His mother, proud and worried. Janet saying the statement had been broadcast in the warehouse break room and everyone was impressed. Dr. Chen offering support if he needed to process the attention. And Elena, with just 4 words. I tried. I'm sorry. Marcus typed back, You did great. Thank you. The statement helped, but it didn't eliminate the problem entirely. Over the next few days, Marcus still got approached twice by reporters who'd somehow tracked him down. Both times he politely declined to comment and walked away. One followed him for half a block before giving up. It was invasive and exhausting and exactly what he'd feared, but it also sparked something unexpected. People started recognizing him, not from media coverage, since his face hadn't been published, but from the context clues. The cafe, the warehouse, the single father with a young daughter. Most people were kind. His neighbor Mrs. Patterson brought over a casserole and told him he'd restored her faith in humanity. A woman at the grocery store thanked him for being a good example for her son. Even Paolo reported that business at the cafe had increased, with people stopping in to see where it happened. Everyone wants to believe in miracles, Paolo said philosophically. You gave them one. But there was a darker side too. A handful of people accused Marcus of exploiting Elena's tragedy for personal gain. Anonymous comments online questioned his motives, suggested he'd orchestrated everything for the reward. One particularly vicious article speculated about whether he'd known who Elena was all along. Marcus tried to ignore it, but the accusations stung. He'd done nothing wrong, had wanted nothing except to help someone who needed it. The idea that people could twist that into something ugly made him furious and helpless in equal measure. Dr. Chen helped him process it during their second session. People struggle with genuine altruism, she explained. It challenges their worldview. If you help purely out of kindness, it means they could have too, and maybe they didn't. That creates cognitive dissonance. It's easier to question your motives than examine their own inaction. So they tear me down to feel better about themselves? Essentially, it's not about you, Marcus, it's about them. Dr. Chen leaned forward. But I understand how much it hurts anyway. Being misunderstood, having your intentions questioned, that's painful, regardless of the psychological explanations. I just want it to stop. I want to go back to being nobody. You were never nobody. You were just private. She smiled gently. And you will be again eventually. This kind of attention has a shelf life. Something else will capture public interest, and you'll fade back into the background. In the meantime, focus on what you can control, your reactions, your boundaries, your own narrative. Marcus took her advice to heart. He stopped reading articles about Elena's story, stopped Googling his own name to see what people were saying, stopped checking social media altogether. He focused instead on what mattered: his daughter, his remaining time at the warehouse, his plans for the future. 2 weeks after Elena's press conference, the media attention had noticeably decreased. Marcus could walk to his car without looking over his shoulder, could take Lily to the park without worrying about cameras, could breathe without the constant low-level anxiety that had been plaguing him. Life started to feel normal again, or at least a new version of normal. He finished his final shift at the warehouse on a Friday afternoon. Janet organized a small goodbye gathering in the break room, sheet cake and warm soda, and coworkers he'd barely gotten to know wishing him well. It was awkward and touching in equal measure. "You're one of the good ones, Marcus," Janet said, shaking his hand. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Walking out of the warehouse for the last time, Marcus felt a strange mixture of relief and melancholy. This job had been a lifeline when he desperately needed one. It had kept food on the table and a roof over their heads during the darkest period of his life. But it had also been grinding and exhausting, a constant reminder of how far he'd fallen from where he'd hoped to be. Leaving it behind felt like closing a chapter, like taking a step toward something better instead of just surviving something terrible. That weekend, Marcus enrolled in online classes to finish his degree. The courses started in 3 weeks, and he felt a flutter of nervous excitement he hadn't experienced since before Lily was born. He was actually going to do this, going to finish what he'd started and build toward a future he'd chosen instead of one that had been forced on him. Sunday afternoon brought another ice skating trip with Elena and Lily. This time, Lily showed off her improved skills, managing to glide several feet without falling. Elena cheered loudly, and other skaters smiled at the obvious joy of the little girl and her encouragement team. "She's getting good," Elena said, skating up beside Marcus. "She practices in the living room, without skates. It's terrifying." Elena laughed, and the sound was freer than Marcus had ever heard it. "I'm leaving town next week. Leaving town. Going to stay with my aunt in Vermont for a while. Get some distance from everything here." Marcus felt a pang of something like loss, though he couldn't quite name it. "That's probably good for you." "Yeah, but I'll be back. And when I am, I want to really start working on the foundation. I meant what I said about wanting you involved." She glanced at him sideways. "Have you thought about it?" "Some. I'm still not sure what I'd bring to something like that." Perspective, empathy, real understanding of what it's like to struggle. Elena caught his eye. "Marcus, you're the only person in my life who helped me without having any idea who I was or what I was worth. That kind of uncomplicated compassion is exactly what survivors need. Not pity, not charity, just someone seeing them as human and responding accordingly." "When you put it that way, so you'll think about it? Seriously?" "Yeah, I will." Lily skated over, demanding they race her to the other side of the rink, and the serious conversation gave way to play. But Marcus tucked Elena's words away, letting them settle in his mind alongside the other changes and possibilities that were slowly reshaping his understanding of his own life. That night, after Lily was asleep, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table with a notebook and pen. He started making lists, Things he wanted to accomplish, goals for the next year, ideas about what kind of work might actually fulfill him instead of just paying bills. The foundation Elena had mentioned kept coming back to his mind, working with domestic violence survivors, helping people rebuild their lives after trauma. It resonated in ways he hadn't expected. He understood what it felt like to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control, understood the desperation, the fear, the grinding exhaustion of just trying to survive one more day. If he could take that understanding and use it to help others, maybe everything he'd been through would mean something beyond just his own survival story. It was a big idea, probably too big for someone who hadn't even finished his bachelor's degree yet. But then again, a month ago, the idea of having financial security had seemed equally impossible. And look where he was now. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from Elena, a photo of her packed suitcase with the caption, "Vermont, here I come. Thank you for everything, Marcus, for seeing me, for caring, for showing me that good people still exist." He typed back, "Thank you for trusting me, for teaching me about accepting help, for giving Lily a friend who gets what it's like to be scared but keeps going anyway." The response came quickly. "She's lucky to have you as her dad. I'm lucky to have her as my daughter. That's what makes you such a good father. You recognize the privilege of it." Marcus smiled at that, then set his phone aside and returned to his lists. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime sounds: traffic, sirens, the distant bass thump of music from a neighbor's apartment. The same sounds that had been the soundtrack to his life for years, but they felt different now. Less threatening, less oppressive. Just the background noise of a life that was finally, slowly, becoming something he'd chosen rather than something that had happened to him. The next few weeks passed in a productive blur. Marcus started his classes and was surprised by how much he'd missed academic work, the challenge of new concepts, the satisfaction of understanding complex systems, the way good teaching could make even dry material interesting. His professors were supportive when he explained his situation, offering flexibility for a single parent balancing school with childcare. Lily thrived in the new rhythm of their days. More time with Daddy, more activities, more stability. She'd always been a happy child, but now she seemed lighter somehow, as if she could feel the difference in Marcus's stress levels, even if she couldn't articulate it. Marcus's mother noticed it too. "You smile more," she said during one of their weekly dinners. "Real smiles, not the brave face you've been wearing for the past 2 years. Things are better, a lot better. And you're letting yourself enjoy that instead of waiting for the other shoe to drop." Marcus considered this. She was right. He'd spent so long in survival mode that good fortune had felt temporary, suspect, but gradually he was learning to trust that this new reality might actually last. "Dr. Chen says I'm making progress," he admitted, learning healthier patterns around money and security. "It's weird, Mom, having enough, not having to calculate every single purchase against our survival." "That's not weird, sweetheart. That's normal. What you were doing before, that was the aberration. This is how life is supposed to feel. I don't want to forget, though, don't want to lose touch with what it was like. You won't. That's not how formative experiences work. They shape you, become part of who you are." Diane reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "But you can remember without reliving it. You can let yourself be happy without guilt." It was advice Marcus was still learning to follow, but he was trying. A month after Elena left for Vermont, she called him on a Tuesday evening. Marcus could hear wind in the background, the sound of water. "Where are you?" "On my aunt's dock. There's a lake here, and at sunset it's—" She trailed off. "It's peaceful. I'm learning what that feels like again." "That's good, Elena. Really good. I've been working with a team on the foundation plans, drafting mission statements, researching best practices, talking to other organizations doing similar work." She paused. "And I keep coming back to what you said that first morning, that someone did the same for you once." Marcus frowned. "I said that?" "When I asked why you were helping me, you said someone had done the same for you when you needed it. Was that true?" He thought back, trying to remember that cold morning in the cafe. "Not exactly. I mean, people have helped me in small ways. My mom, obviously. Coworkers who covered shifts when Lily was sick. Paolo giving me day-old pastries to take home sometimes." He paused. "But nothing like what you needed. I think I said it to make you feel less alone in needing help. So you lied to me? There was no anger in Elena's voice, just curiosity. I told you what you needed to hear to accept help you clearly needed. If that's lying, then yeah, I guess I did. Elena laughed, a bright, clear sound that carried over the phone. That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of practical compassion I'm talking about. You read the situation and responded to what would actually help, not what was technically most honest. I'm not sure that's something to build a foundation on. I disagree. Sometimes people need permission to accept help. They need to believe they're not uniquely broken or weak, that other people have struggled too and made it through. You gave me that. Her voice softened. And now I want to pay that forward. Create systems that give people permission to need help, permission to accept it without shame. When do you come back? Marcus asked. Next month. And when I do, I want you to meet the team we're putting together. No pressure, but I think you'd be good at this, Marcus. Not running things. We have people with the credentials for that, but as an advisor, someone who can look at our plans and programs and say whether they'd actually help or whether we're just rich people throwing money at a problem we don't really understand. That's a very specific job description. Because it's a very specific need, will you at least meet with us? Hear what we're planning? Yeah, I can do that. After hanging up, Marcus sat on his small balcony despite the cold, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The idea of being part of something larger than himself, something that could help people the way Elena had been helped, filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Maybe this was what all of it had been leading to. Not just his own salvation through Elena's gratitude, but the opportunity to turn his hardship into something meaningful, to take the empathy born of struggle and use it to ease someone else's path. It was a beautiful idea. Terrifying, but beautiful. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter against the wind and allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, he was finally becoming the person he'd always wanted to be. Not someone who'd never struggled, but someone who'd struggled and used that experience to build something good. Someone who understood that kindness wasn't weakness, that accepting help didn't diminish your strength, and that the smallest gestures could ripple outward in ways you'd never imagine. Inside, his phone rang again. Lily's voice came through the monitor, calling for water. Marcus smiled and went to her, leaving the cold night behind for the warmth of his daughter's room, grateful beyond measure for the life they were building together. A life that had started with $5.50 and grown into something neither of them could have predicted. A life shaped by compassion, sustained by hope, and blessed by the strange, unpredictable magic of human connection. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in March, when the last stubborn patches of winter snow were finally surrendering to spring. Marcus stood outside a renovated brownstone in one of the city's nicer neighborhoods, checking the address on his phone for the third time. This was definitely the place. A bronze plaque beside the door read, Brooks Foundation Offices, in elegant lettering. He'd worn his best khakis and the button-down shirt that had served him through the restaurant meeting with Elena's parents. Looking at his reflection in the glass door, Marcus felt the old insecurity creeping back. Who was he to advise a foundation? A guy who'd barely kept his head above water for 2 years, who still sometimes woke up in a panic thinking he'd missed a bill payment. The door opened before he could knock. Elena stood there, and the transformation from that first morning in the cafe still caught him off guard. She wore professional clothes, but her smile was genuine, unguarded. "You came," she said, pulling him into a quick hug. "I said I would." "I know, but I was still nervous you'd change your mind." She stepped back, gesturing him inside. "Come on, everyone's excited to meet you." The interior was warm and inviting. Hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, comfortable furniture arranged in conversation clusters rather than the sterile office setup Marcus had expected. Photographs lined one wall, images of people laughing, working, healing. The whole space felt intentional, designed to welcome rather than intimidate. Elena led him to a conference room where 5 people waited around a large table. They all stood when Marcus entered, and he felt suddenly self-conscious under their collective attention. "Everyone, this is Marcus Reed," Elena said, and there was pride in her voice that made Marcus's chest tight. "Marcus, this is the team." She went around the table with introductions. Dr. Rachel Foster, a psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery. James Chen, a nonprofit management expert with 20 years of experience. Maria Santos, a former domestic violence survivor turned advocate. David Park, a lawyer focusing on family law and protective orders. And finally, Claire Mitchell, who'd spent a decade working in women's shelters before burning out and taking time to reimagine what effective help could look like. They all shook Marcus's hand with warmth and what seemed like genuine respect, which only made him more nervous. "Please sit," Dr. Foster said, gesturing to an empty chair. "We've heard a lot about you from Elena." "Probably more than necessary," Marcus said, attempting lightness. "Not at all," Maria interjected. Her eyes were kind but assessing. "Elena told us how you helped her, what that meant during the worst period of her life. That kind of practical compassion is exactly what we're trying to build into every aspect of this foundation." James opened a folder in front of him. "We've spent the last 6 weeks developing our mission and core programs. Elena was very clear that she wanted survivor voices and real-world perspective at the center of everything we do. That's where you come in." "I'm not a survivor of domestic violence," Marcus said carefully. "I don't want to take up space that should belong to people who've actually experienced what Elena went through." "No," Claire agreed, "but you're a survivor of poverty, of single parenthood with no support system, of the kind of grinding economic stress that makes people invisible to everyone around them." She leaned forward. "And you're someone who saw past invisibility to the human being underneath. That's the skill we need help cultivating." Elena nodded. "We can hire all the experts in the world, Marcus, but expertise can become disconnected from reality if you're not careful. You keep us honest. Keep us focused on what actually helps instead of what looks good on paper." David slid a document across the table. "These are our proposed programs. We'd like you to review them and tell us what you think. Not as someone with professional credentials, but as someone who understands what it's like to need help and not know how to ask for it." Marcus picked up the document, scanning the contents. There were plans for emergency housing assistance, job training programs, legal aid services, trauma counseling, financial literacy workshops. All of it looked comprehensive and well-researched. "This is impressive, Bun," he said honestly. "But," Elena prompted, reading something in his expression. Marcus hesitated, then decided honesty was what they'd asked for. "It's a lot, like an overwhelming amount. If I'd been Elena, coming from months on the street, terrified and barely functional, I don't know if I could have navigated all of this." The room went quiet, James and Doctor. Foster exchanged glances. "Go on," Claire said. "I'm not saying the services aren't needed. They are. But there's something missing between person in crisis and person ready to engage with comprehensive programming." Marcus struggled to articulate what he meant. "When I was at my lowest, when Lily's mom left and I lost my job and everything felt impossible, I couldn't have filled out applications or attended workshops or made 5-year plans. I was just trying to survive the next 24 hours. "So what did you need?" Maria asked. "Someone to see me, to acknowledge I was drowning without making me prove I deserved help." Marcus thought back to those dark months. "My mom brought groceries without asking if I needed them. Paolo gave me day-old pastries and never mentioned it. Mrs. Rodriguez at Lily's daycare didn't charge late fees when I couldn't pick her up on time." He looked around the table. "They gave me dignity before they gave me solutions. That's what let me eventually accept bigger help." Elena's eyes were shining. "That's exactly what you did for me. You didn't ask questions or require me to explain myself. You just brought coffee and a bagel every morning like it was the most natural thing in the world." "Right," Marcus said. "So maybe before all these programs, there needs to be a bridge. Something low stakes and immediate that just meets people where they are without expecting them to be ready for comprehensive services." Dr. Foster was scribbling notes rapidly. "Like what? What would that look like?" Marcus thought about it, remembering the cafe, the quiet mornings, the gradual building of trust. Basic needs met without bureaucracy, food, warmth, safety. A person who shows up consistently without judgment. Time to breathe before you have to start rebuilding. "A safe space," Claire said slowly. "Not just physical safety, but emotional safety. Permission to be broken for a while." "Yeah, because healing isn't linear, right? Some days Elena could probably handle filling out housing applications. Other days just getting out of bed was probably an achievement. Programs that don't account for that variability end up losing the people who need them most. The team started talking among themselves, building on Marcus's idea, sketching out what it might look like. He watched them work, impressed by how quickly they integrated his perspective into their existing framework. These weren't people protecting their egos or defending their expertise. They genuinely wanted to build something that worked. After an hour of intense discussion, James called for a break. Coffee appeared, along with sandwiches that Marcus suspected Elena had specifically requested. As the others drifted into smaller conversations, Elena pulled Marcus aside. "See? I told you you'd be good at this. I basically just told you everything was too complicated. You told us we were missing a crucial piece. There's a difference." She smiled. "That thing you described, the bridge between crisis and comprehensive care, that's revolutionary, Marcus. Most programs assume people are ready to engage with services when they're still just trying to survive. You're naming the gap. It's just common sense. No, it's lived experience, and it's exactly why we need you on this team. Not as a consultant who comes in once and disappears, as a real, ongoing part of what we're building." Marcus felt the weight of what she was asking. A real role, ongoing responsibility, being part of something that would continue beyond a single conversation or moment. "Elena, I'm still in school. I've got Lily. I don't have nonprofit experience or you have empathy and honesty and the ability to see what's missing because you've been there. That's more valuable than any credential." She touched his arm lightly. "I'm not asking you to quit everything else, just to be part of this. A few hours a week, attending meetings, reviewing plans, keeping us grounded in reality. We'd pay you, obviously. It would be actual employment, not volunteer work. You'd pay me to tell you when your ideas are too complicated? We'd pay you to bring perspective we desperately need and can't get anywhere else." Elena's expression turned serious. "Marcus, I'm asking you to help me build something that could help people like me. Like you. People who fall through the cracks because existing systems weren't designed with actual human beings in mind. Will you do it?" Marcus looked through the glass wall of the conference room at the team still deep in discussion, at the photos of healing on the walls, at the foundation Elena was trying to build from her own pain and survival. He thought about the cafe, about buying breakfast for a stranger, about how small acts of consistent compassion had rippled outward into this moment. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'll do it." Elena's smile was brilliant. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." But Marcus thought maybe he did. It meant taking trauma and transforming it into purpose. It meant using the worst experiences of your life to prevent others from suffering the same way. It meant believing that broken people could heal enough to help heal others. They rejoined the meeting, and for the next 2 hours, Marcus found himself fully engaged in planning discussions that felt almost surreal. These people were asking his opinion, valuing his input, building his ideas into their framework with genuine enthusiasm. By the time the meeting ended, they'd sketched out a preliminary program they were calling First Steps, a low-barrier, high-support initiative that would provide immediate needs without requiring survivors to navigate complex application processes or commit to long-term programming. Food, basic supplies, consistent human presence, and time to stabilize before moving into more structured services. "This is good," Dr. Foster said, reviewing their notes. "This addresses a real gap in existing services. Marcus, would you be willing to help us develop the training for the people who'd staff this program? We need them to understand what you described, how to be present without demanding, how to build trust gradually." "I can try," Marcus said. "That's all we ask." Walking out of the brownstone 2 hours later, Marcus felt energized in a way he couldn't quite explain. He'd spent years just trying to keep his head above water, his entire existence focused on the narrow goal of surviving another day. The idea that his struggle might have equipped him to help others navigate their own, it gave everything he'd been through a different kind of meaning. His phone rang as he reached his car, his mother. "How did it go?" "Good. Really good, actually. They want me to be part of the team." "Of course they do. I could have told you that." Diane's voice was warm with pride. "Are you going to do it?" "I already said yes." "Good. Now come pick up your daughter. She's been asking for you every 5 minutes for the past hour, and I'm running out of ways to distract her." Marcus laughed. the sound free and genuine. On my way. Lily was indeed waiting by the window when Marcus arrived, and she launched herself at him the moment he walked through the door. Daddy, Grandma let me make cookies, and I saved you 3. 3 whole cookies? I'm honored. They're a little burnt on the bottom, but Grandma says that's okay because that's where all the flavor is. Marcus caught his mother's eye over Lily's head, and Diane shrugged with a smile that said she'd said no such thing, but was willing to be misquoted if it made Lily happy. Driving home with his daughter chattering about her day, Marcus felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was his life now. Not perfect, but no longer a constant battle against drowning. He had meaningful work ahead of him, a daughter who felt secure and loved, and the freedom to build a future he actually wanted. That weekend, Marcus took Lily apartment hunting. Their current place had served its purpose, but it was time for something better. Something with space for Lily to play, maybe a small yard, definitely better heating. The real estate agent showed them 3 places, and Lily had strong opinions about each one. Too dark. Wrong color bathroom. It smells like old people, Daddy. Finally, they found a 2-bedroom unit in a quiet building with a small community playground behind it. Lily's eyes went wide when she saw the playground. Can I go on the swings every day? Every day, Marcus confirmed. Even when it's raining? We'll see about that one. The apartment was more than Marcus had ever imagined affording. Actual space, natural light, appliances that worked, a bedroom for Lily that was big enough for a real bed and a dresser and all her toys with room to spare. We'll take it, Marcus told the agent. Signing the lease felt like a statement of faith in his new reality. He was committing to a future that included stability and comfort, choosing a life instead of just enduring one. They moved in 2 weeks later with help from his mother, and surprisingly, Paolo, who showed up with his nephew and a truck without being asked. You think I let my friend move without help? Paolo had said when Marcus expressed surprise. This is what friends do. Elena sent a housewarming gift, a beautiful set of dishes, and a note that read, For all the meals you'll share in your new home, may they always be filled with love and laughter. Marcus set the dishes in the cabinet carefully, touched by the gesture and its implicit belief that his life would include dinner parties and gatherings and the kind of casual entertaining he'd never had the resources or energy for before. That first night in the new apartment, Marcus tucked Lily into her new bed, a real bed with a headboard, not the toddler bed they'd been squeezing her into for the past year. Do you like our new home, Princess? Lily nodded sleepily. It's big. I won't be lonely? You'll never be lonely. I'm right next door, and we can get a nightlight if you want. Can we get a dog? Marcus laughed. Let's settle in first, then we'll talk about dogs. You always say that, because it's always true. But I promise we'll talk about it for real, soon. Satisfied, Lily snuggled into her blankets. Daddy, are we rich now? The question caught Marcus off guard. Why do you ask that? Madison at school says only rich people have big apartments and new beds. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. We're not rich, baby, but we're comfortable. We have enough. That's different from being rich. What's the difference? Rich means having way more than you need. Enough means you don't have to worry about not having what you need. We're very lucky to have enough. Lily thought about this seriously. Is Miss Elena rich? Her family has a lot of money, yes. But she was sad and scared, so money doesn't make you happy? Out of the mouths of children. No, sweetheart, money can make things easier, but it can't make you happy by itself. You know what makes people happy? What? Being loved, being safe, having people who care about you. Marcus smoothed her hair. You could have all the money in the world and still be lonely or scared. Or you could have very little money but be surrounded by people who love you and feel rich in all the ways that matter. I feel rich, Lily announced, because you love me and Grandma loves me and Miss Elena is our friend. Then you are rich, Marcus agreed, his throat tight. The richest person I know. After Lily fell asleep, Marcus walked through the quiet apartment, still hardly believing it was theirs. He thought about the conversation with his daughter, about the wisdom children sometimes stumbled into accidentally, about how his definition of wealth had fundamentally changed in the past few months. Yes, Having financial security mattered. It removed the constant low-level terror that had colored every decision for so long. But what actually felt transformative wasn't the money itself. It was the freedom it provided. Freedom to choose. Freedom to breathe. Freedom to be present with his daughter instead of perpetually distracted by survival calculations. The foundation work started in earnest the following week. Marcus attended his first official team meeting as a paid consultant, still feeling slightly fraudulent about the title. But the team treated him as an equal, valuing his input alongside their professional expertise. They worked on developing the First Steps program, and Marcus found himself drawing on memories he'd tried hard to forget. The shame of needing help, the terror of asking for it, the relief when it came without judgment or conditions. He translated those experiences into training guidelines, helping Dr. Foster craft scenarios that would teach staff how to hold space for people in crisis without trying to immediately fix them. "This is brilliant," Claire said, reviewing his notes on building trust with trauma survivors. "You've basically created a roadmap for compassionate presence. Did you study this somewhere?" "I lived it," Marcus said simply. "That's all." Maria, who rarely spoke during meetings but whose opinion carried weight when she did, nodded slowly. "The best teachers of compassion are the people who needed it most and didn't receive it. They know exactly what was missing." As weeks turned into months, the foundation took shape. They secured funding from the Brooks Family Trust and several other donors impressed by their comprehensive approach. They hired staff who understood trauma from personal or professional experience. They found a location for the First Steps Center, a renovated house in a quiet neighborhood, deliberately chosen to feel like a home rather than an institution. Marcus was there the day they opened the doors. Elena stood beside him on the porch, both of them looking at the simple sign that read, "First Steps, a safe beginning." "We did it," she said quietly. "You did it. I just helped." "We did it together." Elena turned to face him. "None of this would exist without what you showed me in that cafe, Marcus. That kindness without conditions was possible. That showing up mattered. That consistency could save lives." She paused. "You saved my life, and now we're building something that could save others. That's not nothing." The first person to walk through the First Steps doors was a young woman named Sarah, who reminded Marcus painfully of Elena in those early cafe days. Hollow-eyed, jumpy, clearly terrified, but desperate enough to try. The staff member who greeted her, a woman named Jennifer who'd survived her own abusive relationship years ago, didn't ask questions or require paperwork. "Would you like something to eat?" Jennifer asked simply. "We have soup today, and coffee, and a quiet place to sit if you need it." Sarah nodded, unable to speak, and Jennifer guided her inside. Through the window, Marcus watched the young woman accept a bowl of soup with shaking hands. Watched her eat slowly at first and then faster, like someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Watched her gradually unfold in the warm, non-threatening environment, her shoulders dropping from their defensive hunch. "That's what it looked like," Elena said beside him, her voice thick with emotion. "When you helped me. Exactly like that." Marcus remembered. The way Elena had held that first coffee cup like it was precious. The way she'd eaten the bagel so carefully, making it last. The gradual softening as she realized he wasn't going to hurt her or demand anything in return. "She's going to be okay," Marcus said, believing it, "because someone saw her. Someone cared." Elena wiped at her eyes. "Just like I'm okay because someone saw me." That evening, Marcus returned to his new apartment feeling emotionally wrung out but purposeful. Lily was having a sleepover at his mother's house, which meant Marcus had rare time alone with his thoughts. He made dinner, actual cooking, not just heating something from a box, and ate slowly, savoring the quiet. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena, a photo of Sarah smiling tentatively at something Jennifer had said, the fear in her eyes already beginning to recede. The caption read, "First Steps indeed. Thank you for making this possible." Marcus texted back, "Thank you for trusting me to be part of it." The response came quickly, "Always." Marcus thought about the path that had brought him here, the desperation and fear and grinding poverty that had nearly broken him. The morning he'd walked into a cafe and made a choice to help someone even though he barely had enough for himself. The ripples that had spread from that one small act, transforming both his life and Elena's in ways neither could have predicted. He thought about the foundation growing from Elena's trauma and his compassion, about the people they'd already helped and the hundreds more they might reach, about how suffering, when transformed into purpose, could become something beautiful. And he thought about Lily, sleeping peacefully at his mother's house, secure in the knowledge that her father loved her and that their life was stable. Lily, who would grow up knowing that kindness mattered, that helping others was worth the cost, that broken things could heal if given enough time and care. Marcus's life wasn't perfect. He still had hard days, still occasionally woke up in a panic about money before remembering his new reality, still struggled with accepting that good things could last. But he was healing, learning to trust stability, learning to believe he deserved the help he'd been given. And in helping build something that could ease other people's suffering, he was discovering that healing wasn't just about personal recovery. It was about taking what you'd learned from pain and using it to prevent others from hurting the same way. That was the real gift Elena had given him, not the money, though that had been life-changing, not even the gratitude, though that had been humbling. The real gift was purpose, the opportunity to matter in ways that extended beyond his own small life and narrow concerns. He'd helped save Elena by buying her breakfast, and now together they were building something that could help save countless others, not with grand gestures or massive interventions, but with the same simple philosophy that had started everything. See people, meet them where they are, and offer help without conditions or judgment. It was a small revolution, built on the radical idea that compassion should be freely given and that everyone deserved dignity regardless of their circumstances. And it had all started on the coldest morning of winter, in a corner cafe with $5.50 and a willingness to see another human being's pain. Marcus finished his dinner and cleaned up slowly, letting himself sit with the fullness of his gratitude for Elena's survival, for his own transformation, for Lily's security, for the work they were doing that might spare someone else the worst of what they'd both endured. The apartment was warm and quiet, full of possibility and promise. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, full of people struggling and surviving and occasionally, miraculously, helping each other through the darkness. And somewhere in that vast urban landscape, Sarah was taking her first steps toward healing, held safely by a program built on the simple truth that kindness, consistently offered, could change everything. Marcus smiled and turned off the lights, ready for whatever came next. 6 months after First Steps opened its doors, Marcus stood in the foundation's main office, reviewing the quarterly report with a sense of disbelief that never quite faded. The numbers told a story he was still learning to trust. 43 people served in their first month, 72 in the second, over 100 by month 6. Not just numbers on a page, but actual human beings who'd walked through those doors desperate and left with at least a thread of hope to hold on to. Sarah, the first woman they'd helped, was now volunteering at the center twice a week. She'd moved into transitional housing, started therapy, and found part-time work at a bookstore. Her transformation wasn't complete. Healing never moved in straight lines. But she was building a life she'd chosen rather than one forced upon her by fear. "We're going to need to expand," James said, looking over Marcus's shoulder at the statistics. "At this rate, we'll be at capacity by fall." "That's a good problem to have," Marcus replied, though the thought of expansion brought its own anxieties. Growing meant more responsibility, more people depending on what they'd built, more opportunities to fail people who desperately needed them not to. Elena appeared in the doorway, her hair pulled back in a professional ponytail, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Marcus without asking if he wanted it. Their cafe ritual had evolved but never disappeared. "The city council wants to meet with us," she announced. "They're interested in our model, talking about potential municipal funding to replicate First Steps in other neighborhoods." Marcus nearly dropped his coffee. "The city council? Seriously?" "Apparently word's gotten around about what we're doing. Claire's contacts in the shelter network have been singing our praises, and Dr. Foster presented our outcome data at a conference last month." Elena's smile was cautious but excited. "This could be big, Marcus. We could help so many more people." "Or we could lose what makes it work by scaling too fast," Marcus countered, his practical nature kicking in. "Bureaucracy and red tape are exactly what we're trying to avoid. Which is why you'll be at that meeting with me, to make sure we don't compromise our principles for funding." Elena sat down across from him. "I need your voice in those rooms, Marcus. The people who write checks and make policy decisions, They don't understand what it's like to need help and be afraid to ask for it. You do. The meeting with the city council happened 3 weeks later in a marble-floored building that made Marcus feel distinctly out of place despite the professional clothes Elena had insisted he buy for such occasions. 6 council members sat behind an imposing bench, their expressions ranging from genuinely interested to politely skeptical. Council member Patricia Morrison, no relation to the FBI agent who'd found Elena, led the questioning. Mr. Reed, Ms. Brooks, thank you for coming. We've been reviewing your program outcomes, and frankly, they're impressive. A 78% success rate in transitioning participants to stable housing or comprehensive services is remarkable. Thank you, Elena said smoothly. We attribute that to our low-barrier approach and focus on, I have some concerns, interrupted Council Member Davis, a stern-faced man in his 60s. Your program operates with minimal oversight, no intake assessments, no verification of need, no measurable milestones. How do you prevent abuse of services? How do you ensure accountability? Marcus felt Elena tense beside him, preparing to defend their model with the practiced arguments they'd rehearsed. But something in Davis's tone, the implicit assumption that people in crisis couldn't be trusted, that poverty required surveillance, sparked something protective in Marcus. May I respond to that? Marcus asked quietly. Elena nodded, yielding the floor. Marcus leaned forward slightly, meeting Davis's skeptical gaze. Council member, I was that person you're worried about. 3 years ago, I was a single father who'd lost my job, struggling to feed my daughter, too ashamed to ask for help even when I desperately needed it. The thing that kept me from seeking assistance wasn't lack of need. It was fear of judgment and bureaucracy. The room had gone very quiet. Marcus continued, his voice steady. When someone is drowning, you don't ask them to fill out a form proving they can't swim. You throw them a rope. Our lack of oversight isn't negligence, it's intentional. We're removing every possible barrier between someone in crisis and the help they need. Yes, that means sometimes people get help who might not fit traditional definitions of need, but it also means we catch people before they become statistics, before they end up dead or institutionalized or so broken they can't be put back together. Davis opened his mouth to respond, but Council Member Morrison held up a hand. Mr. Reed makes a valid point. The traditional model requires people to prove they deserve help, which creates its own costs. Emergency room visits, incarceration, long-term social services. She looked at her colleagues. If First Steps is preventing those downstream costs while maintaining the outcomes we're seeing, perhaps we should be questioning our assumptions about accountability rather than questioning their model. The debate continued for another hour, but Marcus noticed a shift in tone. His words had landed somewhere, made the abstract concrete. These weren't just statistics or policy discussions. They were real people with real struggles that Marcus had lived through himself. When they finally left the building, Elena grabbed Marcus's arm, her eyes bright with emotion. That was incredible. You were incredible. I just told the truth. You made them see. That's the gift you have, Marcus. You make people see what they're determined to ignore. She squeezed his arm. They're going to fund us. I can feel it. And she was right. 3 weeks later, the city council approved a grant that would allow them to open 2 more First Steps locations over the next year. The vote was 5-1, with only Davis dissenting, and even he acknowledged that the program had merit. The expansion brought new challenges: finding the right staff, maintaining quality while growing, ensuring each new location captured the spirit of what made the first one work. Marcus found himself increasingly involved in training, teaching new team members the subtle art of compassionate presence. It's not about fixing people, he explained to a room full of newly hired staff members. It's about seeing them, really seeing them, not as problems to solve or cases to manage, but as human beings having the worst day of their lives who need someone to care without conditions. A young woman in the back raised her hand. But how do you do that without burning out? How do you care that much and not let it destroy you? Marcus thought about this carefully. It was a question he'd wrestled with himself as the foundation grew. You have to remember that you're not responsible for fixing everything. You're responsible for showing up, for being present, for offering help. What people do with that help is up to them. Some will take it and transform their lives. Others aren't ready, and that's okay. Your job isn't to judge their readiness, it's to be there when they are. The woman nodded slowly, considering this. Also, Marcus added with a slight smile, you have to take care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup. Boundaries matter. Self-care isn't selfish. It's necessary. After the training session, Doctor, Foster pulled Marcus aside. You're a natural at this. Have you considered going back to school, getting a degree in social work or counseling? Marcus had considered it, actually. He'd finished his bachelor's in business administration the previous semester, finally walking across that graduation stage with Lily and his mother cheering embarrassingly loud in the audience. The question of what came next had been percolating. Maybe, Marcus said. I like the work I'm doing now, though. Not sure I need another degree to do it effectively. You don't need it, Dr. Foster agreed. But it might open doors, give you credentials to match your natural abilities. Just something to think about. That evening, Marcus mentioned the conversation to his mother over dinner. Lily was occupied building an elaborate castle with her mashed potatoes, occasionally eating a bite when she remembered that was the point of dinner. What do you think? Diane asked. Does more school appeal to you? I don't know. Part of me thinks my real education came from living through hell and surviving it. What would a degree teach me that experience hasn't? Frameworks, language to articulate what you already know intuitively, connections in the field. His mother paused. But more than that, permission. The world gives weight to credentials, even when the person holding them isn't as qualified as you are by experience. A degree might give you permission to take up space in rooms where your voice needs to be heard. Marcus considered this. He thought about the city council meeting, about how Elena's family connections had gotten them in the door, but his lived experience had made the difference. Both mattered. Both had power. Maybe I will look into it, he said finally. Good. And Marcus? Diane's expression was serious. I'm proud of you. Not because of the foundation or the degree or any of that, because you took the worst period of your life and turned it into something that helps other people. That takes a kind of courage most people never find. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Thanks, Mom. Daddy, my castle is done, Lily announced. Can I eat it now? Yes, Princess. You can eat your architectural masterpiece. As Lily demolished her potato castle with enthusiastic bites, Marcus thought about courage and transformation, about how trauma could either destroy you or, if you were lucky and had the right support, refine you into someone capable of preventing others from suffering the same way. The next few months brought continued growth. The second First Steps location opened in a neighborhood plagued by domestic violence and poverty. The third location was still in development, but the model was proving replicable. Each site maintained the same core philosophy: low barriers, high compassion, meet people where they are. Marcus visited all the locations regularly, talking with staff, observing interactions, occasionally sitting with participants who needed someone to listen. One afternoon at the newest location, he met a man named David who reminded him uncomfortably of himself 3 years earlier. David was in his mid-30s, recently divorced, had lost custody of his kids due to unemployment and housing instability. He sat at one of the tables staring at nothing, his whole body radiating defeat. Marcus approached carefully. Mind if I sit? David shrugged, which Marcus took as permission. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Marcus didn't push conversation, just offered presence. Finally, David spoke. Everyone keeps telling me it'll get better, that I just need to hang in there, apply for jobs, get back on my feet. His voice was flat, emotionless. But they don't understand when you've lost everything, your family, your home, your purpose. Getting back on your feet feels impossible. I don't even know who I am anymore without all that. Marcus recognized that particular flavor of despair. No, they probably don't understand, but I do. David looked at him skeptically. Yeah? 3 years ago I was you, single father, lost my job, drowning in debt, no idea how I was going to survive the next week, much less build a future. I felt invisible, like I'd been erased as a person, and all that was left was this collection of problems nobody wanted to deal with. So what changed? Someone saw me. Someone helped me when I couldn't help myself, and eventually, not quickly, but eventually, I found my footing again. Marcus paused. It didn't happen overnight, and there were days I wanted to give up, but I kept showing up, kept trying, and little by little things got less impossible. And now? David gestured around the center. Now you work here? Helping other screw-ups like me? Now I help build systems that catch people before they fall as far as I did. And you're not a screw-up. You're a person dealing with circumstances that would challenge anyone. That's different. David's eyes were suspiciously bright. I miss my kids. I know. That's the worst part, isn't it? Feeling like you're failing the people who depend on you most. How did you keep going when it felt impossible? Marcus thought about Lily, about the mornings he'd dragged himself out of bed purely because she needed him, about the nights he'd cried silently in the shower so she wouldn't hear, about the determination to give her better even when better seemed unreachable. My daughter. She needed me to survive, so I did, even on days when I didn't want to. Marcus met David's eyes. And you'll survive too. Not because it's easy or because someone can fix it for you, but because you keep showing up, keep trying, keep taking the help that's offered without shame. That's all any of us can do. David nodded slowly, processing this. They talked for another hour, and while Marcus couldn't fix David's situation, he could offer understanding and hope that things might eventually improve. Sometimes that was enough. That evening, Marcus told Elena about the conversation. You gave him what you got from me, she observed, recognition that his struggle was real and survivable. It's all circular, isn't it? You survived because I helped. I thrived because you helped me back. Now we help others who'll hopefully help someone else someday. It's not circular, Elena corrected gently. It's exponential. Every person we help has the potential to help others. Every David who makes it through could be the next person buying breakfast for a stranger or building something that saves lives. She smiled. That's the real power of compassion, Marcus. It multiplies. As the Foundation's first anniversary approached, the team decided to host a small celebration. Nothing elaborate. That wasn't their style. Just a gathering at the original First Steps location with staff, volunteers, and participants who wanted to attend. Marcus arrived early to help set up, and found Elena already there arranging food donations from local restaurants. Sarah was there too, setting out cups and napkins with the careful attention of someone who understood how much small kindnesses mattered. I can't believe it's been a year, Sarah said when she noticed Marcus. Feels like yesterday I walked in here terrified and starving. Look at you now, Marcus said warmly. Volunteering, working, building your life. Because someone gave me space to breathe. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. I was ready to give up, Marcus. Just completely done. But Jennifer gave me soup and didn't ask questions, and somehow that was enough to keep me going one more day. Then another. Then another. Until days became weeks, and I realized I might actually survive this. Elena had stopped arranging food to listen. That's the speech you should give today. Tell people what it meant, why it matters. Sarah looked panicked. I can't speak in front of people. You just spoke in front of us, Marcus pointed out. Just do that, but with a few more people listening. The celebration that afternoon was more emotional than Marcus had anticipated. People told their stories, how they'd found First Steps, what it had meant, where they were now. Some were thriving. Others were still struggling, but had hope they hadn't possessed before. A few had relapsed into old patterns, but had come back because they knew the door was still open. When Sarah spoke, halting and nervous but deeply sincere, about how a bowl of soup and a non-judgmental presence had saved her life, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Then Elena stepped forward, and Marcus realized she was going to talk about him. A year ago, my parents and I sat in a cafe and met the man who'd kept their daughter alive when she'd lost everything. We wanted to thank him, to repay him, to somehow express gratitude for something that felt beyond words. Elena's voice was steady, but emotional. Marcus said he didn't need thanks, that he'd just bought breakfast, nothing special. But that's the thing about Marcus. He genuinely doesn't see how extraordinary, ordinary kindness can be. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, not liking the attention. So we convinced him to be part of building this. Elena gestured around the room. And in the past year, because of Marcus's insight and compassion and refusal to let us overcomplicate things, we've helped hundreds of people. We've proven that treating people with dignity works, that meeting people where they are, without judgment or bureaucracy, saves lives. She turned to face Marcus directly. You saved my life buying coffee and bagels. And now, together, we've built something that keeps saving lives. That's your legacy, Marcus Reed. Not just helping one person, but creating a system that helps everyone who walks through our doors. The room erupted in applause, and Marcus felt his face flush. He wasn't comfortable with praise. Never had been. But looking around at the faces in the room, Sarah and David and dozens of others whose lives had intersected with first steps, he felt a deep sense of rightness. This was what mattered. Not the recognition or the gratitude, but the actual work of helping people survive their worst moments and find their way to better ones. After the celebration ended and most people had left, Marcus found himself alone with Elena in the quiet center. You know what's funny? Elena said, looking around at the simple, welcoming space. A year ago, I was terrified of everything. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, jumped at shadows. And now I run a foundation. I do public speaking. I've rebuilt relationships with my parents. I'm actually living instead of just surviving. That's not funny. That's incredible. The funny part is that it all started because you bought me breakfast, $5.50. That's what changed everything. She shook her head wonderingly. We spend so much time looking for grand gestures and dramatic interventions. But sometimes the thing that saves your life is just someone showing up consistently with coffee and a bagel. Marcus thought about this. I think most miracles are probably small things we don't recognize in the moment, tiny choices that ripple outward. Then you're a miracle worker, whether you're comfortable with that or not. They stood together in companionable silence, watching through the window as the evening settled over the city. Somewhere out there, someone was struggling. Someone was afraid. Someone needed help and didn't know how to ask for it. But now there were places like this. Doors they could walk through without shame. People who would see them and care without conditions. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from his mother with a photo of Lily holding a new puppy, the dog she'd been promised once they settled into the apartment. The caption read, "She named him Lucky. Says he's lucky because he gets to be part of our family." Marcus smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. His daughter understood something profound, that being part of a loving family was its own kind of fortune, separate from and more valuable than material wealth. I need to get home, Marcus said, showing Elena the photo. Apparently we have a new family member. Elena laughed. He's adorable. Lily's going to be a great dog mom. She's already planning his birthday parties and what costume he'll wear for Halloween. Of course she is. Marcus gathered his things, but paused at the door. Elena? Thank you. For everything, for trusting me, for building this with me, for turning both our traumas into something beautiful. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for caring when you barely had the resources to care for yourself. Elena's smile was radiant. We saved each other, Marcus. That's the real story here. Driving home through the familiar streets, Marcus reflected on how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. The city still hummed with the same energy, still held the same mix of beauty and struggle, but his place in it had fundamentally shifted. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building, creating, contributing to something larger than his own small life. The apartment was warm and chaotic when he walked in. Lily and the puppy were engaged in some kind of elaborate game that involved a lot of running and laughing. His mother sat on the couch watching with amusement, clearly exhausted but happy. Daddy, this is Lucky. He's my best friend. The puppy, a scruffy terrier mix from the shelter, bounded over to Marcus and proceeded to enthusiastically lick his hands. I can see that, Marcus said, kneeling to pet the dog properly. Did you thank Grandma for helping you pick him out? Thank you, Grandma! Lily rushed over to hug Diane, the puppy following and somehow getting tangled in everyone's feet. It was messy and loud and perfect. This was the life Marcus had been building toward without fully realizing it. Not wealth or recognition or grand achievements, but this. Coming home to a daughter who felt secure enough to be silly, to a mother who had time to help with puppy adoption, to an apartment filled with laughter instead of fear. Later that night, after Lily and Lucky were both asleep, the puppy in a crate beside her bed because Lily insisted he'd be lonely otherwise, Marcus stood in the doorway of her room and simply watched. His daughter, safe and happy. his dog, already beloved, his life, transformed beyond recognition. He thought about the cafe, about that cold December morning when he'd made a choice to care about a stranger. Thought about how that single decision had cascaded into everything else: the trust fund, the foundation, the purpose, the healing. Small acts, consistent compassion, showing up even when you barely had anything to give. That was the real magic. Not the money or the recognition or even the measurable outcomes. The magic was in choosing kindness when indifference would have been easier, in seeing another person's humanity when society encouraged you to look away. Marcus's phone buzzed one final time. A text from Paulo. "Come to cafe tomorrow morning? On me. Want to hear about celebration?" Marcus smiled and typed back, "Same time as always. Some habits are worth keeping." Because that's where it had all started, and that's where Marcus could remember why it mattered. In a corner cafe before dawn, with cheap coffee and cheaper bagels, a connection had formed that changed 2 lives and eventually hundreds more. The cafe would always be sacred ground in that way. A reminder that you never knew when a small act of kindness might ripple outward into something transformative. Marcus checked on Lily one more time, kissed her forehead gently, and retreated to his own room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help, new stories of struggle and survival. The work was never finished, the need never completely met. But tonight, Marcus allowed himself to simply rest in gratitude for Elena's survival, for his own transformation, for Lily's security and happiness, for the foundation that was helping so many people find their footing, for the strange, unpredictable journey that had brought him from the darkest period of his life to this moment of peace and purpose. As Marcus drifted off to sleep, his last thought was simple and profound. He was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Not because some grand plan had been revealed, but because he'd made small choices consistently toward compassion, and those choices had compounded into a life worth living. In the morning, he'd go to the cafe. He'd drink coffee with Paulo and share stories about the foundation. Then he'd pick up Lily from his mother's, take Lucky for a walk, maybe do some homework for the graduate program he'd secretly started applications for. The rhythm of a good life, built on the foundation of surviving a terrible one. And somewhere in the city, someone who felt invisible and afraid might walk through the doors of First Steps, might accept a bowl of soup without judgment, might find the strength to survive one more day because someone cared enough to create a space where dignity came before documentation. The circle would continue, the compassion would multiply, and Marcus Reed, who'd once bought breakfast for a desperate stranger, would keep showing up to ensure that kindness remained the cornerstone of everything they built. Because in the end, that was the only currency that truly mattered. Not wealth or status or recognition, but the simple revolutionary act of seeing another human being and choosing to help. That was the lesson Elena had taught him by accepting his help with such profound gratitude. That was the lesson he was teaching others through the foundation. And that was the lesson Lily would learn, growing up watching her father choose compassion over indifference, connection over isolation, hope over despair. The city slept around him, full of broken people and beautiful possibilities. And Marcus slept too, dreamless and peaceful. A man who discovered that saving one life could lead to saving hundreds, and that the smallest gestures could echo across years and transform everything completely. The story that had started with $5.50 on the coldest morning of winter had grown into something neither Marcus nor Elena could have imagined. But that was the nature of genuine kindness. It multiplied beyond prediction, touching lives in ways that rippled outward forever. And in a corner cafe that opened before dawn, the same table by the fogged window waited, ready for the next person who needed to be seen, ready for the next small miracle to begin. Because that's what kindness did. It waited patiently, showed up consistently, and changed everything when given the chance. One cup of coffee, one bagel, one person caring when they could have walked away. That was all it took. That was everything.